just need to, like...
Leave.
Maybe Gucci bag.
Alright. Let's start this up. Having technical difficulties. So, let's...
Ophelia? No.
Technical difficulties means Joe doesn't have his alcohol yet.
No, I don't.
Also, the cat is in the room when she shouldn't be.
Cat-related technical difficulties.
Alright, are we up and running?
We are up and running.
Okay.
It's a very different look for us.
Yeah.
Cat scratched me. I'm gonna get cat and scratch fever.
Alright, let's kick this son of a bitch off.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming back and joining us for part 2 of our increasingly growing Let's Throw On the... Good point. Let's just jump onto Facebook and start to chat about our random thoughts on BNS. Make sure that you have your trusty alcohol with you. We have gone ahead and revised our format for this discussion. So
that we now have a format.
Instead of 30 seconds of, okay, we need to cover this, and then we didn't do any of that.
Not a single of which touched on 30 seconds. Anyway.
We have now a list of pre-selected techniques that we intend to look at. Those that we thought were most interesting, either in a good or a bad way. So we will be going down that list. The person who selected that technique will start off by giving us their thoughts on that, and then other people will jump in to give comments. Additionally, we've moved from Joe's semi-useful laptop to my semi-useful iPad, so if every once in a while it looks like we're looking above you, it's just because we want to give the implication that we are talking down to you about mechanics.
If you're really interested, that's actually often called condescending.
But, of course, I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm far too busy thinking about important things that you wouldn't understand.
Okay.
So,
let's start.
Let's go ahead and get started. The first technique, that is not the correct
It was
sheet.
a Google sheet.
The first technique that we're going to be talking about is abrupt internment. Again,
The names in this damned book are amazing.
However, the pull for this is not. See? Segue.
There you go.
Ooh.
So, I know that Gangrel specifically have gotten a buff for their survival skill with there's a merit that gives like a +2. However, the thing that sticks out to me is that this is a social survival versus physical dodge, which has to be up there for one of the worst possible comparing pools, which just, it bothers me so much. I think the idea is cool, I just don't think the way that it works is. There's also the really weird thing that you can also just something into the ground.
So what this technique does,
you describe the power
for
sheet.
those who haven't read the book yet,
Fair. So what this power does is you spend a point of blood and a standard action, and then whatever your target is on becomes, if you succeed, becomes grappled by the ground. This means you don't have to actually abide by the you can only take one step while you're maintaining grapple rule.
now the ground is maintaining it for you.
Yeah, the ground is
Very
maintaining.
helpful ground.
And you don't have to, be next to the person. And then the ground can also grapple objects and kind of cache them. Up to the size of a small car. So I guess that would be useful to somebody.
Not necessarily useful, but very badass.
It's neat.
Yeah.
grab a car, slam it into the ground. Someone asks, why'd you do that? I pointed the car in the ground. That's why I did that.
It was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is a very cool power. It's not a useful one. You're not going to land the hit against anyone you need to land the hit against. And if you do land the hit, it's a static test for them to escape. So they're going to get out. On top of that, anyone who has 2 dots of protein doesn't have to test to get out. But you can lock objects into the ground, and isn't that what it's all about?
No.
Uh,
Doesn't do ag.
I've been playing Masquerade wrong.
Oh.
For those of you watching at home, I just clicked away from the video so that we just might look at the camera. We'll click back periodically to look for comments.
It's fair.
Fair.
Alright. Joe, do you have anything to say about abrupt internment?
Only that I will never, as a writer, be good enough for a name like that.
So, Devin just raised a solid point that is one of the continuing themes in this book, and that we alluded to previously, which is a lot of techniques in this game, both in this book and the previous book, are very cool, but things that you would never really want to buy. The problem being that when you spend 12 XP on a sheet, except in the most extreme of cases, that is a very significant investment into your sheet. You need that thing to either be incredibly useful or consistently useful. A lot of these are going to be fun, cool things that are a neat trick in one scene, and then it probably won't come up for the rest of your time. That is not very good on a PC. That is incredibly good on an NPC. This book was written with storytellers in mind.
Yeah, I can see it being used for, like, the NPC who's, like, planned everything, and so out comes all this stuff that they had stored previously.
Yeah.
Which, okay, possible.
Alright, alchemical attunement.
Yes. So I just want to talk about this one because it actually raises a kind of a cultural thing that I've noted in the book. One of the things that they're obviously clearly working on, and you know, I'm just like staying because I'm like super not visible because of you. One of the things that's really noticeable in this book is that they're clearly expanding their sources of mythology and their sources of mysticism. So obviously, you're seeing reference to powers that are much more dryadic in nature. You're seeing reference to powers and paths that are much more focused on what you might call occultism in terms of sort of pagan occultism rather than the sort of traditional Western idea of wizardry. And one of the things that's really noticeable in alchemical attunement is that it pretty clearly draws on some Kabbalistic, thank you, references, which is dangerous. I think they don't do it too badly here, but it's definitely when you're referencing things like if you don't have particularly Jewish what's the word I'm looking for, a knowledge of Jewish history and mythology, and that wasn't meant to denigrate Judaism. I call all religion mythology. Yeah, if you don't have exposure to Judaism and Kabbalism, it is really complex, really intricate, and there are a lot of different sides who pretty staunchly disagree with one another. So when I first noted in Jewish folklore, which is the first 3 words of this powers read up, I was like, oh, we're taking some risks. Neat. What I will say is that it's actually a pretty fucking cool power. Alchemical attunement has a series of 7 different sub-powers, so 7 different ways this power can be employed. You've got sort of all of the traditionally magically relevant metals: gold, iron, lead, silver, quicksilver, that sort of thing. And essentially what this boils down to is each of these provides a different benefit. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, really, and that's why I want to talk about most of the powers that I have on my list. Jacob made the point, and that point was addressed. There's a theme of, this is really cool, but why would you buy it? My approach to building characters, when they're not just straight thugs, is very generally about building the best toolbox. You need to have the most tools for any job. And so there are definitely some techniques in here that are meh, but remember, that's something to remember of every technique in the original book as well. You know, not every power is on the same level of utility. Not every power is as good as every other power. That's just kind of the nature.
Why would you want to pretend to be a werewolf?
Right. Well, that's a different... But the point is, you balance across builds, not across powers. And that's an important thing to understand when you're talking about game balance. So this power is really, really good if you, like me, enjoy toolboxes and think that you tend to do better when you just have more options. So I really like this. I think it's great for that, and definitely an interesting power.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I do think that the individual...
By the way, we're being very restrained right now. That's only because the powers we've talked about so far are very tame compared to the shit we're going to get into later. Don't worry, we're going to be weird.
We're pacing it with the alcohol as well.
They are.
We get to the weird shit once we've had plenty. I'll disagree a little bit here. This is a very cool power. This is a very flavor-tastic power.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot in terms of things that I see that are useful. A lot of this is geared towards shifters. Gold that does aggravated damage to some of the shifters that are vulnerable to gold. What is that, Korax? No.
Yeah, Korax or gold.
Okay. And silver has the obvious... Okay, now that I'm looking at it, yeah, no, there's some... Quicksilver is giving you an initiative boost and a movement boost.
In general, it's a very defensive power, which I love. For those of you who weren't watching the last video, offense wins games, defense wins championships every single time.
I also... One of the effects that I knew I loved from the beginning was the copper bonus. As long as you have the gaze and focus of a target, everyone that can see you gets their gaze and focus. Which, first, is just very cool. That's just awesome. But also, one of the most difficult decisions to make in mass combat is whether or not person A has person B's gaze and focus.
I want everyone to have this power just so I never have to ask that question again.
It's always just... Outside of the obvious cases where, yes, if you've thrown a punch at this person, they have your gaze and focus, it's tricky to make that decision a lot of times. And I like powers being opened up that explicitly say, yes, if this is met, then you have their gaze and focus.
In general, in this crowd, you're going to see positive responses to clearly delineated powers and negative responses to powers that are ambiguous.
Let's switch seats. This has a high back.
Okay, that makes sense.
That'll...
Maybe you won't fucking Dr. Evil me out of frame.
I'm just.
This is our very professional process, so, work with us here. Oh, yeah, that's
so
world
much better.
Yeah, there we
It's no
go.
longer a supervillain demanding a ransom.
Pay up.
I said you're not super. Alright, next power.
Shannon, do you have anything you want to say about this one?
I just thought it was really cool. It definitely has a lot of toolbox abilities because there are so many different things and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to go and deal with, what fits the situation. So I think that's definitely going to be nifty.
All right. Next, we've got another one of Joe's, Black Mist. So on the naming here.
So Black Mist, I really, really like this power. Most of the powers that I specifically called out were because I really liked them. There are a couple that I called out because I think there are issues associated with them. So Black Mist in particular, I think is really interesting because it takes something that we pretty much all have come to consensus is a bad power, which is Obtenebration, and we've made it a really cool power. We've done some really great things with it. And one of the things that you'll note as we go through these techniques, just flat out, like, La Sombra, they got love. Not all the love they got is great, but they definitely got love.
You might see some younger gen La Sombras.
And so one of the big things with this power, what this is doing is you're filling a space with Black Mist, but it's got different effects and it fills the space differently. So for example, you've got Dreadful Gloom, which fills a room up to, 100 square feet. And so what this does is actually cause all of the mortals in the room to go into this semi-hypnotic state where they just sort of go about their business and ignore the things happening around them.
Specifically, this is a obtenebration and dominate
Yes.
technique.
Yeah.
A lot of these are mental effects.
And so what you have from that is, I mean, immediately, obviously, you have the La Sombra are now the Masquerade solvers. They're better at it than anyone else, and it's no longer close. One of the things about obtenebration that always kind of falls flat in Chronicles is that it's mostly good against mortal stock NPCs, which is a problem because once you get over about 250 XP, STs don't run mortal stock NPCs because they can't do anything. Everyone's good against them. When you start running Chronicles like WPI is, shameless plug, at 100 XP to start and slowly build that up over time, what you're going to see is, one, stock NPCs show up a lot more, and two, people who are used to thinking about them as these sort of mediocre, or not even mediocre, these useless throwaways are going to have a really rough time. People who played in our Sabat game, when we first started, the Chronicle was at a very low XP, and so they showed up, and there was this little squad of ghouls patrolling the city, and they're like, we can handle some ghouls, and got wrecked, got annihilated. Stock NPCs are only bad at really high XP. At low XP, they're an ST as a godsend. And because they're good, one of the things you see a lot that's important when you're talking about builds and game design is that a good defensive power is a power which blocks a good offensive power. So Tyrant's Gaze is the best power in the game because it blocks all of the other powers. Therefore, it is capable of turning off anything. There is no better power because it defends everything. Now, it's a little slower than some other options, it has some weaknesses built into it, but fundamentally it is the most versatile way to turn off an opponent, which makes it the best power. This is very similar in that this is something that's going to go against stock NPCs, which are much better, making this power really, really good.
I would also say to that one of the limitations of Shroud was that it only had a lethal option.
Yeah.
If you dropped Shroud on stock NPCs,
You were
they
killing
die.
some folks.
This is a way to deal with people in a, shall we say, masquerade safe way. Joe mentioned one of the effects. You've also got Tenebrous Haze, which is going to fill a floor of a building per activation. And when active, people become terrified and try to flee and can't find the exit. And if that isn't the most sadistic La Sombra thing you've ever heard, then you've probably met a La Sombra, because actually they're better at sadism than that. But it's still pretty cool. And then the third effect, Fog Bank, is one of the only powers around for dealing with sunlight. We are now at a point where if you stack everything together, you can create a vampire who can walk around in sunlight for 5 or 10 minutes and just not take damage. Which opens up a whole lot of avenues for some very particular assassins.
One of the fascinating things about that is there was a build before that was capable of moving around during the day. Well, really there are two. But the better one revolves around obtenebration, using Armor of Darkness and...
Was it Temporis?
Temporis is for your haven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But walking around during the day using Armor of Darkness and Second Wind and Will to Survive, you're capable of just moving around the city during the daylight. So what Fog Bank really is like a Cloak the Gathering, but for sunlight. It extends what was a really, really good build for a solo character, and it gives it out to lots of other people. So now all they need is just Will to Survive, and you've got really their La Sombra. So you've got an Anarch or a Sabat hit squad burning down Camarilla Elders at noon, which is, if you don't know why that's a really good build, probably just quit watching. You're not gonna, the rest of this isn't gonna be useful to you. It's just gonna be kind of weird, archaic mutterings about strange magic. But yeah, point is, great power, really interesting, takes obtenebration, which was bad, makes it doesn't make the whole power great, but it definitely gives it access to something that it didn't have before in a way that makes me very, very excited about this power.
Yeah, the thing about obtenebration is that it was a bundle of different tricks. And some of the tricks were useless, and some of the tricks were cool, but it never quite came together as its own discipline. Shroud was always good, and then the other 4 powers were some variety of okay to useless. And so the series of techniques that have been added to boost obtenebration really help with those who have obtenebration, mostly La Sombra, but the other groups that can get it, define themselves mechanically. Some special notes that I'll call out here before we move on. Other things that are nice about Black Mist. You can layer these effects. You can drop normal Shroud on top of your Fog Bank, on top of your Scary Maze, on top of your Hypnosis, and just totally screw with whatever helpless pack of mortals is around you. Anarchs can also buy it, but this is in love for Sabbat La Sombra.
One of the things that I actually just rereading it noticed that this actually has over on most other crowd control powers. With respect to mortals, there is nothing in this. There's no caveat of if they take damage, it ends, or if they're in danger, it ends. At least not one that I mean, I'll have to double check. Like, I'm looking at it now, but I don't think there is one. Yeah, cool. So there's generally not for at least the Mind Fog, which is a huge deal because that, obviously you could always drop Shroud and kill a whole bunch of folks. But what's really good is dropping Shroud, killing a whole bunch of folks who aren't trying to escape your Shroud.
So no test, no save,
yeah, exactly.
Do not pass go.
It's in a lot of ways, this is what am I looking for here? This is a technique that emulates a lot of what the Ventrus' old best merit, which was Aura of Command, did. In that, if you're dealing with stock NPCs and humans, they just lose. And there's not a contest, there's not a challenge involved. It just sucks to be a human in a world of vampires. Yeah. I think
oh boy, does it. Shannon, Black Mist?
Something that I think we see again here, and I think we'll see a couple more times with these techniques, is that they do several different effects, and this one is like broken into 3 you can choose from, but other times you'll see them where it's just like, it does this, and it'll do this.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I don't think you see it as much in the original book. So
yeah, it's definitely, there are much more complicated powers in this book that have a wider variety of application, and that's where you get into a double-edged sword of game design. Is that you want your players to feel like they're getting bang for their buck, and the truth is that the first BNS book was so well written and covered so much, it can be a challenge. So you want people to get a bang for their buck, but at the same time, you don't want to have these crazy, super-powered, ridiculous techniques flying around. And, techniques have always been more about finesse than raw power. So when you're looking at these, having lots of options can be frustrating to memorize the rules, but it's one of the few, I think, sort of good middle grounds that they could have found.
All right, on to our next one. Blood Tempering. This is one of the techniques that was covered in our preview. Very first preview. Woo! So at first, we were all pretty underwhelmed by Blood Tempering. Yeah. This is a Quietus Fortitude technique, and you can pick, in the original, one of 3 effects. Either you can take damaged or old equipment and go ahead and make it function as something, go ahead and give it 2 equipment qualities and use this thing as if it were broken. Generally not all that useful. Probably nice in some plots, possibly in ST's Nightmare if a plot hinges around a destroyed computer. So STs beware, just rip out the hard drive and walk away with it. Improvised weapon, really cool. Grab a nail gun and turn it into a rifle, a broom that functions like a mace. Again, really cool for a storyteller who wants to hit a particular flavor, and possibly useful if you are an Assamite who has been separated from their golf bag of swords. But
just skip ahead to the cool power.
Then we've got another one that doesn't matter, and then we have...
So before we do it, I just want to explain. We mentioned that there are lots of powers with sub-powers in this book. There are a few powers with sub-powers, but there's really only one sub-power that matters. This is one of those powers.
Then we have Unbreakable. you can apply your blood to a weapon, and for a period of 1 hour, it cannot be broken by mundane or supernatural effects.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, Jacob.
What power used to break weapons before they could do any damage?
Force, Jacob.
Huh. What does force do?
It breaks weapons.
No, I mean, like, what's the useful effect of force? +1 damage,
No.
you say?
No.
Huh. Is there another effect? Is there another effect that can be applied to weapons that do +1
Ask me on the
damage?
video what force does. What a stupid fucking question. How are you qualified to be here right now?
So it used to be... You know, that got hurtful at the end.
They got dark.
So it used to be the standard maximum pool. The standard maximum pool in a game, the standard maximum damage was 4 crit 6. You do 4 damage on a normal, you do 6 on a critical success.
There were exceptions, but...
The primary one being if you get Mortis 5, which is very difficult to get and now comes with a free skeletal horse.
Only if you're a Premacine.
You'll do 5 crit 7 damage. This means that Force and BBT, Balls Bloody Talons, Quietus 6. Fun fact, did you know there's a Quietus 7? Bet you can't remember what it does. Force plus BBT will do 5 crit 7 on its own, as long as you have a handy Ancilla or Neonate friend to make your sword unbreakable. If you pick up Mortis 5 on top of that, probably you're playing with too much XP, but now you're doing 6 crit 8. This is a crazy power-up for Elders.
They need a friend.
They need a friend, but Ancilla and Neonate supporting their Elders might be recognizable to you as the premise of Masquerade. Okay, yeah, Dragon Breath does get you up to 6 crit 8, doesn't it?
No,
But
Dragon Breath, you can do 5% with Dragon's Breath.
and even then, that's incredibly blood intensive.
The difference there is you do that with spread to 3 people in every mana only. The most blood intensive build I ever managed to build, I think, was able to do that twice. It was at 600 XP and basically had no useful merits.
This is an unbreakable weapon that you can swing in every one of your celerity rounds. And unbreakable doesn't just mean that you can use force with it, it means personal armor isn't breaking it, which means you don't have to carry around your golf bag of sword.
Not only that, you don't have to keep re-BBTing your swords, which is a significant blood expenditure change. Considering that the thing that gave you back your blood for BBT is a technique, and so if you're an elder, blah, 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 blah. Point is, it's great.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty significant power-up.
Yeah. So this is the first paradigmatic shift we see in the techniques. All the other techniques were cool and did some good stuff, but fit very easily into the world with some wiggling. This is the first time that we see, flat out between this and the Brouhaha merit we saw in our other video, a serious DPS thug is gonna spit 7 damage at you every single action. And that's a huge fucking deal. A Brouhaha Thug is now the highest DPS you can score in this game, and it's by a pretty substantial margin. Even builds that get up to 6-8 flat out don't do as much average damage because of the Brouhaha merit. So this is, it's paradigmatic. It's a huge deal.
And frankly, this is one of the places where I have the biggest problem. We've talked a lot about how BNS is a fantastically crafted system. One of the reasons is that it set hard rules in the sand. I just said sand, so that just sort of...
It drew lines in the sand, which is to say that it had hard rules.
It had very good and controlled rules in the game. You had all of these powers, and there were fundamental limits on what you could and couldn't do with them. There was not a way to combine force with weapons. We're starting to break those rules. There are going to be several other places in this list of techniques where we see places where those old fundamental rules from the core book are being played around with. And that is risky. I think it's relatively restrained here. I think the meta is probably going to survive with some significant changes, but it's risky.
The primary implications you see to this power are reduced effective fortitude as the defensive king. One of the things that's really, really important about this 5/7, or if you're a Brujah straight 7 build, is that it is relatively cheap. There's only one out of clan involved for that Brujah. All they need to do is spend the 60 XP for Quietus 5, 78 XP for BBT.
Also,
DJ is... Go ahead.
DJ, Caitiff with Quietus and Mortis should not be allowed. I know, I don't ST, but any ST who allows that should be shaken.
Whoa, that's very possible.
Yeah.
And, like, a potence for free, you pay your 3 merit points for Quietus in clan, you pay your 2 merit points for Mortis. That is a build that can exist, and this is the reason...
That's a 6/8 build. And again, that's actually still a lower overall DPS than the Brujah build.
Right.
There's an important calculation you have to keep in mind, which is because Brujah with that merit, auto-crit when they hit, there's no variability to damage. They do 0 damage, they do 7 damage. If you assume because they're Brujah, they're trait builds, on average they're going to be winning ties, which means 2 out of 3, which means you're getting 66% of 7, which comes out to like 4.5 or some shit. Which means that 4.5 is their average on any given turn, whereas 6/8, again, you're going to run into the question of can they crit, because that 6/8 build is Mortis-based, which means you don't have a transformative, which means on average you're going to lose ties, which means 1 out of 3 times you're doing 6 damage, you're almost never going to crit, which means actually you're averaging about 2. Point is, Brujah build is the highest DPS build in the game, and if you want me to make you feel bad inside with math, I'm happy to do that.
On top of all of that, that Caitiff has nothing for traits.
Yeah.
They're in clans. They've got BBT and they've got potence with strength focus, but they're blowing their transformative on pure damage,
Which has always been the problem of Mortis Path. In the past, that was okay because of the way that damage worked out and there wasn't an auto-crit power. Now that there is an auto-crit power... Now, that's not to say a 6/8 build is bad. A 6/8 build, if you can get your traits up decently, is going to fucking murk people.
That's a good point. Both with that and the fact that there are a couple other places here where there are damage boosters. Mortis 5 is going to hurt from that.
Yep. Mortis 5 is actually, I think, Mortis 5 is one of the rare powers that got much worse because of this book.
Okay. Do we have anything else to say about Blood Tempering?
No. I don't
Yeah, for the record, the top 3 effects are like, they're
Yeah.
cute, they're fun. I think it's a really cool party trick to grab a nail gun and murder someone with it.
But if you're really good at fighting, can't you just do that to begin with?
Well, right, but...
Well, so there's virtue. One of the things that we'll talk about in a later video are the New Elysium rules.
Yeah.
And so that's a place where it's really, really important. If you can't bring in weapons, the person with weapons is a big deal. If you can pull the leg off a chair and be like, hey, bitches, this is a sword now.
Solid point.
That's a big deal.
I had not considered that.
Yeah.
And yeah, for the record, we are probably not going to get past techniques in this video. We talked about what we would do if maybe we make it, but those were pipe dreams that will not happen.
Not even close.
Okay.
Next
So
one is
that
you,
was
David. Death's
Blood
Caress.
Tempering.
Death's Caress. Little bit of an emo title. Sounds...
No.
No.
What?
No.
Nope,
you-
sorry.
Bullet time. That's
Bullet
you.
time. Oh, that's me. Skip both of them. 2 of mine. Alright, Bullet Time. Bullet Time is interesting, not really because it's an especially good power. For those of you who don't know, Bullet Time, you spend 1 point of blood, and it gives you a +5 wildcard bonus to your dodge for the rest of the turn. If you move, if you expend an action on movement...
I'm sorry.
It
I
stops.
really
What
quick.
do I do?
Hi, Mom. But you're probably not going to care about this.
I shared the last one, and we got my friends list. Now we're getting your friends list.
Oh, Christ. Joe, go, whatever
Your
you
aunt
were
was on
saying.
here earlier.
Yeah, I saw.
Anyway, back to what we're talking about. So this is a Temporis power that grants you a dodge bonus. Now, this is one of a couple of things that were done in this book to try and make Temporis better. In the last video, I talked at some length about why I don't like that, why I like Temporis to be a difficult choice. That being said, as far as just in terms of just raw power balancing goes, I think this power isn't too bad. One of the things you get out of it is that it's going to give you that dodge bonus and restrict your movement, and that's a big deal because that actually negates one of the things that was best about Temporis before. One of the most useful aspects of Temporis, really the only truly useful aspect of Temporis besides, obviously, mental socials in Celerity rounds, was the ability to take 2 simple actions whenever you want. that mattered a lot. Step kiting is a huge deal. I've talked about it before. I will kill you with movement in this game.
There are 4 witnesses to that.
Yes. In a recent game, I killed a Niktuku with steps. That's how we killed it. And that's really important because that's been a core part of the system for a long time. When you talk about these dramatic effects or these mechanics, one of the things that's really important to understand is that it's not just about having the highest DPS build, it's about controlling the battlefield and having power over the situation. And so Temporis granted that, and this power takes that away in exchange for a better dodge. Now, does that make this power bad? Not exactly. It's a single point of blood, which is great, because that, Temporis isn't a terribly high cost power, but it does kind of start to kick in when you start throwing other powers with it. So it's a relatively cheap, there's no action cost to it. So it's one of those things that you can... James' phone is going off.
My mother is trying to call me now. You see that I'm busy.
Anyway, the point is, this power is one of those things that is situational. Generally speaking, with Temporis, you have a pretty specific build in mind. So usually, most people who have Temporis have it out of clan, which is 60 XP. So generally speaking, you're probably not going to have a ton of XP to play around with. So if you have to buy a technique, probably not this one. But if you find yourself with some spare XP, if all of the mental socials you're using are in clans, for example, Ventru, Malkavians, that sort of thing, this is the kind of technique that's going to be very useful. It's also coincidental that both Ventru and Malkavians have at least one part of their clan that has Auspex as an in-clan to pair with this Temporis. So, point stands, good power, not a great power because of its costs, but if you have the 12 or 20 XP, probably 20 XP because what we talked about yesterday, the problem of Temporis as a 9th gen, but if you have the XP to spend, not a bad way to go.
Yeah, this one bugs me. I've talked about how, Temporis is an incredibly powerful discipline. It is a highly sought after discipline. But it's a very difficult choice to make. The original trade-off was between initiative and dodge and the last celerity round in exchange for your extra 2 simple actions, which are a huge deal that get discounted too often, and the doubled mental social actions. That's a tricky question, and every time they add in, well, okay, you can have the celerity dodge bonus plus a little bit extra, or you can have the initiative bonus of celerity. I get a little twitchy. I think this is a reasonable restriction. I agree with Joe that it kind of hurts one of the fundamental appeals of celerity, but I'm fine with it. Shannon?
I honestly think it sucks you can't move, at all. Yeah,
that
just
rough.
sucks.
Yep, fair enough.
Alright, next we've got another one of Joe's. Call upon the changeling soul.
Changing soul. Oh,
Change-
changeling. Never mind. You wrote it down
fuck
wrong
you.
in the document.
Okay.
Fuck you.
Whoops.
Point is, this is Mythocaria and Obfuscate. And we're going to have another pronunciation with Joe lesson. It's a Greek word. It's not Mythocaria. It's Mythocaria. The more you know. Anyway.
The less you care.
Yeah. Point is, this is Mythocaria 3 and Obfuscate 3. And the long and short of it is, it lets you deal with some fairy stuff. If you have a morality of 3+ and you're not on a path, you can do some fairy stuff. You can copy, a fey mean of a specific kith, and you can basically pretend to be a changeling.
Why?
So I wrote a note in our spreadsheet when we were kind of writing this out about why I don't like this power, and it applies to another power later on. Huh?
More boost?
Yeah, Jacob's gonna give me more boost.
Jacob is now a llama.
It applies to another power later on. The point is, the reason I don't like this is I don't like any system which requires you to buy a book that is not appropriate to that system in order to use all the powers. If this had given you some specific stuff that needs to not. If this book had given you some specific stuff to deal with Fae, I still wouldn't really like it, just because I don't really give a shit about non-vampires in a vampire game. But that would have been much better for me. But this just sort of vaguely references Fey means and references Fey powers and being able to interact with them. And I don't really like that. It's one of the things that a lot of systems do. Pathfinder in particular is awful about it. And I don't like that. I think it makes sense why you would want to do it. They want to give powers that encourage integration. And I don't hate that that's an idea they have. It's not one that I'm interested in pursuing as a player or a storyteller. But it's not a bad idea. But all of that being said, just give me a power that deals with changelings. Mythracaria does that, and it's super cool. The interaction with pixies, all the little details you can do, that's great. But this thing that's like, hey, you need to go read the Changeling book? No. Yeah, I don't want to. That's really all I wanted to say about this power. Mechanically speaking, it doesn't really do a whole lot. It's just this is where I wanted to put that slightly ranty discussion.
Yeah, I mean, this is a power that really, this power almost doesn't belong in this book. This power could have been put in the Changeling book with the subtitle of, hey, this is how you're allowed to play a vampire in a Changeling game if
For
you
reasons.
wanted to.
Yeah.
So,
And I know that some of the people watching and some people who will watch this tomorrow love cross-venue games. You love to play a changeling and a mage and a werewolf and a vampire and blah, 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 all together. We are very not that crowd, and you're going to hear some stuff you disagree with. Flat out, I think the beauty of each of these games is the exploration of its core theme, and I think anytime you add themes, you narrow the focus of individual players, and you reduce your ability to pursue those themes. In the same way that I don't like cross-sect games. I don't like Cam and Sabat sharing a chronicle, because I think it creates a situation where you have to share the spotlight of two very detailed and complex themes. If I'm spending time dealing with the effect of power with its relationship to corruption in the Cam, I don't really have time to explore, a system which is slowly eating itself with hypocrisy, which is the Sabat. So when you add more and more themes and more core groups to a game, it tends to make that game kind of suck more.
having that conversation between vampires and werewolves where they explain what each other are and how their worldviews work is like fun for 15 minutes, and you can't carry a chronicle on it.
Yeah, you can have a plot. I have plots in our game in Sabat that involve mages, that involve werewolves. I don't think anyone's realized which ones involve werewolves. It makes me giggle. But the point is that there are plots that involve both of those. But the difference is that those are being used to further the themes of the Sabat game, which is something you can do when you're using NPCs. It's not something you can effectively do when they're PCs. Unless those PCs are cool with, yeah, I'll play this game just so that other group of players can get what their game is for.
Shannon, anything to say on this?
I just don't get it. I want to play a vampire game. I want to be a vampire. I don't want to pretend to be a fae. If I want to pretend to be a fae, I'll go play a fae. And then pretending. I don't want to double pretend.
Yeah. Okay, next up we've got one of mine, Death's Grip, which is a technique combining Thanatosis and Potence.
It's caress.
What did I say?
Grip.
I mean, fair enough, right?
Yeah.
Death's Caress. Should be called Death's Grip. That's what you're doing. After succeeding in a physical challenge...
You're not grabbing the person. This is the whole point. You're touching them. You're not...
After succeeding in a physical challenge against your target with the Brawl skill, you can spend 1 blood to use Withering, which exempts you from the restriction that you needed to succeed on a grapple in order to use that power. Alternatively, if you make an exceptional success against your target, you can instead use Necrosis without grappling your target. So... Thanatosis was always kind of the red-headed stepchild of the BNS system. It was a... Death's Grip is a power already.
Yep, just keep
okay. Thanatosis was always a good power, I would argue. But especially Withering and Necrosis were not able to be used enough because they were prohibitive to use. Withering especially was a power where if you succeeded on 5 different grapple checks, 3 if you had the focus, and fewer if you could convince a friend to build the same build as you, which is never a good approach to teamwork, then you could remove 1 limb. If you kept on that, you could remove a bunch of limbs, and eventually you get to the point where that's a really good approach at incapacitating an enemy. But when the alternative is just dealing raw damage through grapple and torpouring them, this way, directly applying brawl attacks, doing damage, and either getting the damage boost from necrosis or applying the physical penalties and eventual crippling from withering, people have a good reason to take Thanatosis. I love it. This is exactly what Thanatosis needed.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope, that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was Death's Caress. Next we have Shannon talking about earworm.
Alright. So, earworm is...
Thank God it's not a vicissitude technique.
Is a Melpomene and Dominate technique. And I'm kind of confused with the Dominate. Because what the power does is you make an opposed challenge with your Melpomene pool, and if you succeed, whatever song you're singing gets stuck in their head, and they temporarily gain a derangement obsession triggered by the song, and it lasts for 10 minutes, plus an additional 10 for each performance singing skill, which Daughters of Cacophony already get, can get up to 6 or 7.
8.
8? Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So you can get a song stuck in their head for an extremely long time. If they already have the derangement, if they already have a derangement, it gives them 2 derangement traits, which can cause a psychotic break that, but that doesn't occur until the duration of earworm ends, which kind of sounds like a good way to make a time bomb of a person. So one of the things, so I'm a little confused why it's Dominate and not Dementation, because it is giving derangement traits. Also, this is better than all but the Elder Dementation, number of derangement traits wise, because the other Dementation powers only give 1 when they do derangement traits. So this is just, this, I think it is a lot cooler than it might look at first, and I am wondering if there is a slight change that needs to be made in that editing there, but either way, it's cool.
Joe, any thoughts?
Not really. Yeah, it's a cool power. I like that it inflicts a derangement. It's a little weird that a dominant power inflicts a derangement, but Melpomene has also been associated with derangements and derangement traits before, so that's not terribly shocking. Still weird. Honestly, I feel like Dominate was one of those things where with this they were looking and they're like, okay, this is really just a straight Melpomene power. We need to give it something that having to buy to that power would be a balancing effect on the build. One of the things here is if you have that much Dominate, you're probably if you have Dominate at all, you're probably going to invest in dominating a little bit. So instead of having Dementation and Melpomene, which are both social disciplines, which I think use the same power.
I don't think it...
No,
Subterfuge.
Melpomene's empathy.
There are now, though weirdly, as Devin just pointed
Dementation
out,
is empathy.
multiple techniques that combine Melpomene and Dominate.
Yeah. And my guess would be that this follows a pretty similar logical path that those did, which admittedly those were much more Dominate appropriate. But yeah, I think it stands. I think requiring Dominate instead of Dementation is a balancing decision that causes you to spend at least some XP on a different path.
However, it is just Malpom 1 and Dominate 1, so it's an extremely low cost
Well, but again, the cost isn't the actual discipline of dominate.
Mhm.
It's that if you put dominate on your sheet, you're generally going to want to be okay, at least good at dominate. You see that a lot in techniques that they'll split across different source attributes. They'll split across social and mental, social and physical, physical and mental, whatever.
It is kind of weird in talking about sort of core design philosophy that this is based off of Melpomene 1, which is Phantom Voice, rather than Melpomene 3, which is Siren's Beckoning, what you might expect in terms of...
With arrangements.
Right.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that's an interesting decision.
It's definitely weird. I'm not going to deny that it's a weird build path, but...
Alright,
data or
this is they're soliciting feedback. Yeah, so anything you hear about this that you don't like, you think there's problems, the first chapter of this book has an email address for Jason Andrews where they're actively soliciting feedback and questions for things to clarify in this book. So if you have an objection, send that email, because otherwise I'm going to have to hear you bitch about it for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Also, if there's something in these mechanics that you find weird or wonky, feel free to drop it in the comments and we can chat about it. Last time we did this, admittedly, I was the one that shared the live video, and that's where notifications for it come from. But the last time we did this, we had a few of the writers actually jump in and chat a little bit. So, never hurts.
yeah.
You should share the link now.
I did, but it doesn't create notifications the way Starlight
Gotcha.
Video does. Which, if we weren't already an hour into this sumbitch, I would say we should switch, but oh well.
Oh well.
Alright, so next we've got Enervation of Psyche, which I went ahead and wrote down in my notes as Baby's first psychic assault. I actually didn't, but I meant to.
Yes, you did.
Oh, I did. Just
Yeah.
a different place than I thought. So, what Enervation of Psyche does is by spending a point of blood and using your standard action, you engage in an opposed test with the Auspex test pool. If you succeed, you do 2 unsoakable normal damage, which you might recognize as the exact effect of Psychic Assault cut in half. On
This is
top of
awesome.
which,
Sorry, go ahead.
on top of which, your target loses 1 point of willpower, which is almost better. Like, I'll take 2 less damage for draining off a willpower. Now, the caveat that you may or may not have noticed, because it took me about an hour and a half to notice, is that this does not have any text. What are you doing? This does not have any text that allows it to be continually reused if you fail once. This is a mental targeting power. If I try to hit Joe with this and he resists, I don't get to target him for another 10 minutes.
And that's a very important note for this power.
Yeah.
It's very cool. It's one of the primary problems of mental social builds has been that you can do a lot of cool shit. You can pick up Dominate, you can pick up the other mental powers that aren't as important because Dominate is better, and you can run the fucking field in terms of controlling the battlefield. But it's very difficult to do damage as a mental build. It is, you can pick up a gun with the wits focus, but other than that, it's really hard to inflict damage on your own unless you eat to at least 8th gen. And so having the somewhat limited but still very good ability to directly deal damage on your own by your own power, and also be a willpower drain, because as we've been noting, there are a lot more ways to regain or bolster your willpower in this game than there were before this book came out. So a couple of willpower drains are nice as well.
And they can't regain for 10 minutes, so they can't use any of
Which
those.
is an important balancing impact on a lot of those other powers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love the place that this is going to take in the game. Joe?
Yeah, mostly I agree. One of the things that I'm trying to find was, I think it's a merit that gives you the ability to have brutal and deadly on aspects damaging.
One of the Gango bloodlines.
I think that was it too. Point is, there are some tricks that you can pull with this. There are some good builds that this makes better. One of those builds is the gun build Jacob mentioned. Mentals and guns has kind of gone together for a really long time. And this is one of the things that's going to do a lot for you. This is Auspex and...
Dominate.
Dominate? Okay. So this isn't one that's going to be across tons of clans. Not very many clans have both of those in clan. Obviously, the Crusaders are the first example that most people are going to think of.
Knights of the Moon.
Knights of the Moon are going to have that. And so with the Crusaders especially, this is really, really good because of the fact that the Crusaders are already kind of a combat-y build, and they don't have, like, Celerity, Fortitude, no, they do have Fortitude. I'm sorry, they don't have Celerity or Potence.
And now they can get Potence
Right,
in claim.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what this is granting is a lot more versatility in the way that build can work. Obviously, also, this makes Knights of the Moon even better. Knights of the Moon were already amazing. Of all the bloodlines in this book, they're probably in the top 3 for just how nice these mechanics were to them. Yeah, just flat out, it's a great power. It's limited by the problem of if you lose, you lose. But I think that's a good thing. I think this is very much a weaker, kind of a weaker Psychic Assault. And more than that, it is a chance for builds that don't traditionally have this kind of damage option to get it.
Devin has pointed out that this does not have an exceptional success effect, and I'm going to caution you there and say that this is going to be one of the things that makes it into my document that I'm going to send in as a question, because the standard for exceptional successes is +1 damage. That is usually the assumed default. They made sure to stick it in as many powers to make sure that was clear, but it's still a safe assumption that that is what's supposed to happen here.
I'd have to go back through the mechanics in the core book, but I'm about 80% sure that that's what's going to happen here.
Okay, do we have any other thoughts on this power?
No.
All right, next up is Evil Eye, one of Shannon's selects. Went too far.
This is a neat one.
Here we
Yeah,
go.
this is a neat one. So this allows you to use either Withering or Necrosis as a mental attack, which is a big deal because let's say you have the Withering focus, you can, with 3 people with Thanatosis, you can take off a limb.
Yep.
Which is
in Everyman
one, which is a big thing to start turning people into the Black Knight from Monty Python. That is. So yeah, I just think that's really. I also think it's really interesting. It's taking a physical power and making it a mental one, just completely changing it. So yeah, definitely.
The same note here as before. This one also does not have the limit or the exception to the retesting mental and social powers rule, which is really important because Shannon mentioned Withering, and that's my favorite, and I love that sync up. But if this is also just Psychic Assault that isn't unsoakable but does 3 ag, and that would be fucking scary if it didn't have that restriction.
So that's that's a good note. The most important to me, the most important thing about this power is going back to that, it's a mental power for what is normally a physical power. That's a huge deal, and I think it's a bigger deal than it appears to be up front. We mentioned earlier the Giovanni or the Premisine Mortis Path build is now narrative or weaker in the meta because there are so many high damage builds now. In sort of the opposite, one of the things that always balanced a Necrosis grapple build is that they didn't have any goddamn traits. They had to grapple you successfully, and grappling is hard. If you're not a Nosferatu, getting the traits for a grapple can be a real pain in the ass.
Not to mention the willpower.
Not to mention the willpower. So having this takes that away, and now you've got a mental built Samedi running around, which are 3 words that should really upset you. That is a very upsetting 3 words, because people's mental defenses aren't high. Even in this system, mental defenses didn't get the same kind of buffs that socials did. Your mental defenses, generally speaking, are probably going to be in the teens. It's not terribly hard for me to get above that for this medicine and mental pool. which means that now a build that traditionally lost traits in every round is going to win traits in every man and probably lose traits in celerity. But they're going to be able to hit you with Necrosis or Withering in the everyman and have a pretty good chance of winning. So that changes this build, which was balanced by traits, and makes it much, much more powerful in a way that I think is not necessarily fully intuitive.
And it's worth just always, always, always being reminded, there are a lot of buffs to generic offensive tests in this book.
Yes.
And so where you felt safe before as, say, a 9th gen mental build who was resisting dominate on 18 instead of 16, you're not safe anymore, my friend. You will be hit with my Psychic Assault.
When we talk about meta and paradigmatic shifts, that's one of the biggest ones. I said at the opening of this video, offense wins games, defense wins championships. We're going to have to reprove that with this book. It's changing enough that we're going to have to see for sure how does that meta play out. All right, who's up next? What do we got?
That'd be me.
Eye of Unforgiving Heaven.
So, on the subject of giving mental builds some fucking candy, this one's a bit of a mixed bag. And it's debatable whether or not this is overpowered. So this is a technique clearly built for the Salubri, Valerian 4 and Auspex 4 put together. I light my eye up on fire, and I pick up to 3 targets. Importantly, not the usual within 3 steps of each other that you'll see in things like Spread, but within 1 step of each other. So usually this is only going to target 1 person, unless you guys go ahead and decide to cluster, in which case, thank you.
Or if a good tactician forces you to cluster.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that I'll talk about in a minute.
So what the effect of this challenge is dealing 3 aggravated points of damage and applying blinding to each target, which is a pretty significant combat maneuver that you are not paying willpower for. The primary drawback of this power is that it is your mental investigation pool against their physical dodge.
Now, Salubri are going to have a pretty decent mental investigation if they're built to be psychic
It's the standard psychic, it's the standard Auspex test pool, and we just got finished saying that generic offensive buffs are a lot more available than they used to be. So this is a test pool that can get reasonably high. That said, if you are going against thugs, you should assume you will lose this tie.
Yeah.
Multi-target makes that a little bit easier. If you are targeting 3 people and you are winning 1 in 3 tests, do some quick math, and you are going to hit at least 1 person on average. This is really good. This is 3 aggravated damage and blinding and multi-target. This is a good power. Salubri got love in this game, in this book. I know that you've got a bunch of opinions, so you want to go Shen and then close out? Shen?
Yeah, I think the big thing is it too good? I definitely think with the verses, definitely weakens that, by a decent amount. And is this the one you can only use, like, once for, like, 10 minutes or something, or is that a different one?
I think you're thinking something else.
I think, yeah. So, disregard that.
Because this is resisted by your physical dodge, you can keep using this. So if they dodge, you can fire it at them again.
Yeah. Or you can just Psychic Assault.
Sure. But, 9th gen love.
Yeah. Okay.
Joe?
Yes, so I'm actually going to take a contrarian view here. I actually don't believe this power ends up staying good. What I honestly think happened is that the writer came along, wrote the original power here, which was 3 ag and blinding with spread, and basically said, we need to carve some shit out of this, and then carved too far. I think that the 2 restrictions that are key to this are the step problem and the pool. So let's first address the step thing. there's almost no circumstance where you should be intentionally standing within one step of another character. You can AD from 2 or 3. You can AD from 3 steps. Spread requires you to be within 3 steps of other people, so if you're not there to AD or get AD'd, you shouldn't be doing that. And just sort of in general, my problem with this power comes down to I don't think it can hit enough people at once to make up for its bad pool. You can get a higher offensive pool with this than you could before, but that's still relative. You're still dealing with the fact that it's going to be a substantial investment of XP to be able to hit even an okay dodge. When you're talking about, as an 11th gen with, we'll say 200 XP in the mid-cron stage, I would generally anticipate that if you care about dodge, you're hanging it at a 21 to a 23. That's pretty expensive still to get as an offensive pool, which means that even if you're in the case where you're hitting you're able to get 3 targets at once, you're averaging 1 damage per action against each of them, which makes the average use of this power 3 damage in blinding. Which means that blinding is really the part that matters, because this is 3 soakable damage, which you can do with Lure of Flames on a much wider area. So what you're dealing with here is really just blinding. And I was kind of going through in my head the different things that mitigate blinding. I really like blinding because when it works amazingly. But I think that enough people know that most of the people you're going to go up against are going to invest the 4 XP to not ever care about blinding again. So yeah, I think that this actually started out as a really, really good power that might have been too good and kind of got hacked and slashed until now I don't think it's a good power.
Yeah, those are all reasonable concerns, and I'll say again what we said at the beginning and what we'll say another 10 times, which is this is best as an NPC power, because this is so badass. This is so cool. Your eye opens up and fires divine fire and lightning that strikes down your enemies. So awesome. Maybe don't take it.
And I do want to say, even with that, Jacob's previous statement of the Salubri got some love in this book. Even
warriors and healers.
Even if you think this is a good power, it's comfortably the worst new power they got. Salubri got love.
Alright, next up we've got one of Shannon's, Feral Ichor.
So, Feral Ichor is whenever you activate Feral Claws or Shape of the Beast, you can also activate Quietus Scorpion's Touch. Or, if you have the BBT, you can use that instead.
A version of it.
If you do, you get 2 to your Brawl test pool, and your attacks do 1 additional point of damage. Instead of using the rules for Scorpion's Touch.
Okay, that's a way to hit.
Nope.
No, it's not.
We'll talk about that in just a second.
You're right.
So, it sounds like a way to do some really big amount of damage, but I think I'm doing my math wrong, and they will.
So just real quick,
correct.
If you have BBT and a technique, then you don't have any other elder powers because you're an 8th gen.
Yeah.
That's what actually makes this. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish before I start.
No.
Okay. So this power is another one that looks really, really, really good, and then once you actually build with it, you're like, oh, this sucks. Because what this represents, remember that this is a Protean and Quietus power. So either you're a Quietus build already, you're an Asimite already, and you buy 2 dots of Protean, or you're a Gangrel and you buy Elder Quietus out of clan. You see my concern. So when you start thinking about that, you run into a serious problem. What I will say about this, that this does for you, let me make sure, can you scroll down to where it describes what kind of transformative this is? Or if
it does not change the level of transformative, and Feral Claws is a minor transformative.
Yeah. That's the thing that I wanted to address, is that what this does is let you BBT with a lot more traits. So this is, if you have the investment to make, you can get Protean 4 and start running around, or even better, you could get Vicissitude 4, Protean 2, and BBT. Now obviously that's a fucking wonk build, but you can have that and you will have more traits. You will actually tie the Bruja from the core book as the highest possible trait build. So that's actually pretty notable.
Nox can do it.
Yeah, Nox can build. Yeah, it's a possible build, kind of a wonk build. But if your goal was to get an insane number of traits, with this, I'm fairly certain you could be hanging around in the upper 40s. So yeah, that's the actual virtue of this power. That said, to get it, you are making some serious out-of-clan XP expenditures one way or the other. So probably not good for like 99% of builds, but I will tell you, if you're aiming for an Otro like I did in the MES Chronicle in 2000 whatever, this will be the power that you use to get there. This will be a technique that helps you just spam traits.
The easiest thing I can think of is doing Nos with the Quietus, taking merit. I can't remember what it's called.
Pliable Blood.
Pliable Blood. Getting that and then spending for Feral Claws.
So, I agree with everything that was said, and I don't really have anything to add, but what I do want to do is talk about something that I forgot to bring up at the beginning, which is one of the best things they did in this book, which is the terms minor and major transformative power. That is what we needed for so long. The language to distinguish between a transformative power and a power that changes your physical form but isn't your one transformative power did not exist in the core book, and we needed it here.
So it's worth saying that the phrase minor transformative did exist, but in no way was it actually quantified. So when you ran into things, for example, the Stone of the True Form, there was a difficult question about whether or not that would end the transformatives like Visceratica 4, like Protean 2, things like that. And so this language, what's good about it is it very, very clearly clarifies, that was fucking despicable. Anyway, it very effectively clarifies what is and is not affected by what powers and what concepts. So it's a huge, again, in this crowd, we will always be happier with more explicit and clear language, and that's one of the things this book did the best.
Yeah. So just thank you for that. That is a beautiful decision. Okay, next we've got Feed the Blighted Wolf, which is a technique that came out in the second preview, and that I refrained from commenting on because I wanted to wait to see what they did with beast traits. I also want to save what they did with beast traits for a future episode of this, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. Suffice to say, they didn't really do anything. And I promise to make that discussion last for 2 hours another time, which makes this an incredibly powerful technique. It used to be that there were basically 3 required techniques on a 9th gen thug. You had to take Quicken Blood, you had to take Will to Survive, you had to take Second Wind, and then there were a couple of optional ones, like Relentless Pursuit. This is a required technique for a thug. You can choose, when spending a point of willpower to retest a physical challenge, to gain a beast trait instead of spending a willpower. Now here's the thing. The consequence of gaining 5 beast traits is the loss of humanity, which brings you closer to 0 humanity, at which point you lose your character, and means that you'll have to spend XP if you want to boost your humanity. The consequence of losing too many physical challenges is death. What do you choose? Yeah, I'm gonna take the beast traits, and I'm gonna risk humanity loss. This is, and especially, this is not a technique that lets you keep spending willpower after you've run out of willpower. This is a technique that lets you retest before losing your willpower, so that you keep your resistance maximized as long as you can. Like, lowest tolerance scenario where you don't want to risk humanity loss, you're going to take 1 beast trait anytime you're in a fight for dealing out aggravated damage. So this is 3 free retests before spending a single point of willpower.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's double your normal number of retests, or half of your normal number of retests added to your total. This is crazy. This is huge. Joe?
So there are two things I want to say here. The first, the whole two wolves, one's good, one's bad, Native American myth is pretty regularly attributed to the Blackfoot. I'm Blackfoot. Wasn't us. I've reached out to some friends from reservations and other tribes, and wasn't them. As far as I can find,
Oh no.
somebody on Facebook
Oh no.
who was 1/50 millionth Cherokee just said some shit about wolves once.
There are 2 wolves inside of you. Go see a
The
doctor.
doctor. The recommended number of wolves is
0. Or
So I just want to say I'm not blaming BNS for using that because it has obviously captured the cultural consciousness. It is everywhere. I am not talking shit on this book for having that reference. I am talking shit on that reference for existing. The 2 wolves thing, nah. Generally speaking, most of our be good or evil myths were hey, some people kill people. Don't.
There are 2 wolves inside of you.
Yeah,
Both of them are gay.
Yeah, it's a ridiculously fucking childish belief. It's infantilizing. Not all of our shit was about wolves. We did other stuff.
There were more animals than the one.
We were busy. We weren't just man, how do we relate wolves to I don't
everything.
know, checkers? How is checkers like wolves?
They can only move forward.
I know this is
And
a stupid
diagonal.
rant.
I'm really glad we have you here so we can laugh about this.
I know this is a fucking stupid rant, but I wanted to bring it up. Because there are no wolves inside you. Goose egg. Unless you recently ate an entire wolf.
In which case, still go see a doctor. That is way too
That's a
much.
lot. Anyway, alright, back to the power.
Burn.
Yeah, back to the actual power. So this, when they first posted it as the preview power, stressed me out a lot. And then after reading the book, it stresses me out more. I'm not going to go out on such a limb as to say this is a bad thing to add to the game, but it's a very dramatic change. And it's such a dramatic change to the book, it honestly makes me kind of wonder if the person who wrote this power really understood the gravity of what they were doing. And that's not meant to sound like I know better than the writers, or I think they were making a serious mistake, or they did something stupid. It's more to say that I think that this is one of those things where you have emergent properties of various mechanics where you only see it writ large, and I think this affects a lot of those in a very, very dramatic way. And so what I'm going to say to kind of address that, there are a couple of sort of aphorisms that we use when you're in kind of a very mechanical group of people. One of them is you don't spend willpower on attacks. In general, when you're attacking someone, it is not worth the potential damage to your resistances to retest. You'll have more attack options down the road. Probably don't waste your willpower. Probably don't weaken yourself to try again. And similarly, we talk about, what is and isn't appropriate to use willpower to resist. Generally speaking, you don't spend willpower to resist psychic assault because you can negate that with blood, which is an easier resource to replenish. We talk about, you shouldn't spend willpower on, what the hell's the persuasion, third dot of presence power.
Entrancement.
Entrancement, there we go. Don't spend willpower on entrancement because entrancement doesn't have hard mechanical effects. So you can ignore it, basically, if it comes to a mechanical situation. And so what this power does, by giving you willpower, functionally giving you willpower that doesn't affect your defenses, is it has really severely, why are we super bright now? It has really severely, there we go, changed the calculus of spending willpower. I can't say exactly what will and won't be a good time to spend willpower now, and I don't think anyone can. I don't think anyone is capable of really predicting the meta that far ahead, but it's going to matter, and it's going to matter a lot. And so that's really my mechanical fear with this power, and really just in general. As Jacob mentioned, we'll talk more about beast traits later. Mostly, I really like the things in this book. I'm very complimentary to this book. I will say that probably for me, the one swing and a miss in this book really was the beast trait thing. We'll spend a lot of time on that, and we'll really dig into why it's a problem. But powers that are based on beast traits right now are kind of non grata.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of questions about the beast trait system. We're gonna defer those because whether this will make beast traits matter or not is a whole topic.
And before we go further, Ken, I see you posting about Jerry Falwell and Billy Graham possibly being the origin of the Two Wolves story. And every time I see Jerry Falwell's name, I'm just forced to remind everyone of the greatest quote of all time, which is from when the Reverend Jerry Falwell died. A blemicist wrote, "If you give him an enema, you can bury him in a matchbox." And I just wanted you all, because you probably don't know Jerry Falwell, I just want that to be the only sentence you associate with Jerry Falwell. Back to mechanics.
If we can. Okay. So we just did Feed the Blighted Wolf. Next up is Give 'em Hell. This is another one of mine. Give 'em Hell.
Again, dope names.
Yeah.
Dope names.
This is the worst technique. Not in terms of it has a bad effect, but in terms of they just should not have put this in the book this powerful. This is too much. This is a bad power to add. Give 'em Hell is an Auspex 3 and Presence 2 technique. You spend 1 point of blood, use a standard action to offer your allies encouragement, and for this turn and the next 2 turns, which is 3 total turns, you and your targeted allies, there's not a limit on how many allies you can target, your allies that you have chosen, can attack a single target as though it were 1 size category larger than its current size. In other words, you have increased the number of physical attacker slots. Usually by 2, I don't think it's always 2, but I don't have the attacker slot numbers in front of me. We'll call it an average of an additional 2 physical slots. In addition to that, you may target the designated character with an additional mental or social slot, one or the other. So what this is saying is that without a test being thrown, with no ability to resist, I can spend a blood and an action and give a target 3 additional attacker slots, moving from 4 attacker slots to 7 attacker slots. The one restriction on this, is that in order to use the power, allies must be able to hear directions and encouragement. Okay, DJ is saying if it's a human-sized enemy, it's plus 1 slot. So it's going from 4 slots to 6 slots, which is still absurd. The one restriction is that silence cuts it off. And Quietus 1 is a discipline that exists, and if you can throw that to save yourself, excellent.
Also friendly fire, because people tend to draw Quietus.
This is fucking insane. Attacker slots was one of the biggest restrictions in mass combat, and one of the most important. And the ability to bypass that without any save, any chance to resist, do not pass go, do not collect $200, this is crazy. I am baffled by their inclusion of this power.
Shin?
Yeah. Definitely just seems... it's definitely a bit too much, honestly. To really... No test. Your allies just have to hear you. It's just kind of ridiculous. Bringing something from 4 to 6. I know people with lower initiatives are definitely they feel sometimes they don't get to act, but still, it just gets...
Yeah, the physical attacker slot is not nearly as big a deal as the extra mental or social. Every mental or social power is a paradigm scenario changing power. And being hit by 2 in 1 round is... Yeah, this is a level 5 tribal gift, but better. Joe?
Yeah, so I have a lot of feelings about this power. Honestly, what I really and truly believe happened here is that when they wrote this power, there was an intent to come back and put a limitation, and they forgot. A lot of powers in this book, when I'm reading it, they read pretty clearly like someone came up with the positive effect ahead of, like, that was the first thing they did, and then they kind of came back through to balance each of the powers, to give them drawbacks, to bring them roughly into the same area. And I think they missed this power. I really believe that's what happened. Because as it's currently written, this power isn't just good, it's actually game-breaking. We talked in the last video, like, if there's one thing to write in about, it's this. In this video, if there's one thing to write in about, it's this technique. And to very very quickly burn through it, for a given attacker slot, non-mental attacker slot, on average, a character will take, all other things being equal, 2 well-built characters trying to kill one another. A character will take 2.5 damage per round. So when you start looking at, if you've got all 4 attack slots filled, on average you're going to be taking right about 9 damage, a little bit under 9 damage, because the mental slot, your average damage is different, and that's not important right now. So you're right below 9 damage, and that's actually really important, because what that means is that in a relatively equal combat of 3-on-1, or 4-on-1 rather, they're not generally going to drop the 1 in the first turn, or before they get a turn, before they get to act in some way. It is very, very unusual and very difficult if you're attacking a well-built character to put them down before they get an action. This power changes that, and that's a huge deal to how assassinations work, to how character conflicts work when you're jumping a big bad evil guy, to when you're dealing with all those sort of weird wonky situations. There's so many things that are affected by this that it's really destructive to the meta. I like to talk back about, there was a friend of mine running a Sabbat game who complained that it was really hard having an evil character show up, because in Sabbat what would happen is the first 2 physical slots on a super high initiative would auto hit you for 4 ag. You're now if you have fortitude, you're already at 4 of your 9, usually 9 health levels. Then the mental slot's going to hit you for 4 crit 5 unsoakable normal. Then the social slot's going to hit you for 4 crit 6 ag. And so super rapidly you see characters just get pulled apart. This makes that a million times worse. It means that if you have a hit crew of 6 people, you will basically pick 1 person per turn, or 1 person per round, not turn, per round, and put them down. That's just very destructive. So if you're going to write into BNS, or if any BNS writers watch this video, this power has to get a nerf. It's destructively good.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, do we need to say anything more on this?
I think we're pretty well set.
Okay. That was Give 'em Hell. Again, the one positive note here. Oh, such a good name.
Yeah.
Alright, next we've got one of Joe's powers, Guardian's Vigil.
I'm going to do something that Jacob and I swore we would never do. So,
I was sworn to secrecy.
in a very narrow selection of our friend group, really only 3 or 4 of us, occasionally one of us will pose a question about the Masquerade rules, and we'll get a response, "Don't ever ask that where other people can hear you." And that basically means there's not a good answer in this system, and all of the answers are fucking horrifying. Obfuscate is one of the biggest of those. This power makes reference to that mechanic in such a way that we are not able to ignore it any longer, and now you all must share in this truly fucking annoying question.
We could have pretended.
So Obfuscate in NWAD is a really neat power. Instead of making you invisible, it forces people not to notice you. That's really important, because by being forced to ignore you, even if they have some area attack that they could drop that would hit you incidentally, they can't, because their brain says, oh no, don't attack there, shift to the left until you aren't hitting that spot.
Which makes them very funny.
It makes for some wonky situations, but mechanically, it's the best solution to one of the hardest problems in gaming. The hardest problem in gaming is invisibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because Obfuscate in the BNS system makes you invisible. It has coverage so that small noises and smells and things from you don't get noticed, but it explicitly makes you invisible.
You'll just walk around someone or la-da-da-da-da.
Now there was a question. Could a character with blind fighting hit an invisible character? Because blind fighting is specifically and explicitly for use in cases where you can't see your target. The thing is, there are a lot of powers which allow you to not use blind fighting. Auspex 1, for example, means you can always blind fight without spending. The mechanical problem, therefore, is if you have Auspex 1, are you capable of attacking characters in Obfuscate which you can't see?
Now, I would love if someone in this chat went, hey,
Find a flaw.
here's the text
Find the
that
thing we missed.
explicitly says no. By using the fighting blind combat maneuver, you're not allowed to attack someone in Obfuscate.
This is in no way an exaggeration. I will give you $5.
We want this to not be true, but
But based on all of our ability to find, that's the question. And the answer, mechanically, as the text is written, is probably yes. If you have Auspex 1, you can hit people who are obfuscated without a test, without a special challenge. The answer that's good for game balance that makes Obfuscate not a completely useless piece of shit power is no. Now, the great thing was that this question didn't really come up. We could pretty much ignore it. Until in this book, with this power, Guardian's Vigil, the specter of this question was raised. And so to explain, I'm just going to read to you what that power does. As soon as we get back to it. There we go. Spend 1 point of blood and use 3 standard actions, centering yourself through meditation to activate Guardian's Vigil. So long as you remain within 3 steps of the spot where you activated Guardian's Vigil, you automatically detect intruders or active threats that come within 5 steps of you. Guardian's Vigil does not allow you to see the appearance of someone who is supernaturally concealed, but you know that person is present, and you can attack her without requiring the fighting blind combat maneuver, even if she is supernaturally concealed. Hopefully you see the problem here. It explicitly talks about attacking people without the need for a mechanic which, if we take our happy reading of the previous question, you would never need. The only reason that is something you would write in this power if it is creating an exception to a general rule, which means that the general rule is that you can use Fighting Blind to hit people who are supernaturally concealed, which means if you have Auspex 1, you can always hit people under Obfuscate without breaking Obfuscate. This is a nightmare!
Also, what are the requirements for Guardian's Vigil?
Auspex
Yes.
is involved.
Auspex, celerity, and fortitude.
So, based on the reading that this power very, very, very strongly indicates, this is a useless power.
Yeah, so it's bad on several levels.
And again, I am not joking. If you can find textual proof that what I just said was wrong, I will give you $5. It keeps me up at night.
I'll kiss your feet.
He'll kiss your...
Don't let that. He's got to eat a shoe.
He'll eat the shoe off of your foot and then kiss the foot. That's what he'll do. Point is, this power is a nightmare, and I spend way more time thinking about it than a healthy person should, and now we're just going to move on because there's not a good answer to that question.
Also, isn't Guardian's Vigil like a name of a different power in a different NWAD game?
Guardians. So not only is this a Carthian initiative bonus in Requiem, this is a reskinned APOC power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Kate mentions that Obfuscate specifically addresses how to detect people
that's the problem
using
with this mechanical
Auspex.
question.
The problem
that
is
true, but this isn't to detect them. This is specifically to attack someone you haven't detected.
you've got a two-step mechanic. Number one is that blind fighting allows you to direct offensive tests, including mental and social tests, in case this wasn't horrifying enough, against people that you cannot see. And then Auspex gives you carte blanche, however that's pronounced, to use blind fighting without a willpower cost.
Now,
Amani points out...
This is the last question we'll address on the subject, because very easily this could be the rest of the video. So this is the last one we'll address on the stream. We'll probably do the rest in chat later. You wouldn't know someone was there to blind fight them, though. The thing is, that's not actually how it works. Again, Obfuscate makes you invisible. There's Nosferatu merit that means that people can't notice that you're around, but if you have Auspex active, you always know if someone obfuscated is there. You don't automatically break the obfuscate. You don't even necessarily automatically
as long as
test.
they step within,
but so long as they're within
steps.
some distance of you, you know that they're present. If you actively search the room with obfuscate, regardless of that Nosferatu merit, you know that someone obfuscated is around because you always know when you fail a challenge.
And if you excuse all of that and forget all of those mechanics, which many people do, you've still got the fact that now Obfuscate 4 is a useless fair escape. Because I obfuscate in front of a room full of people who want to kill me, even if I succeed on the 2 tests that I get, because I'm in-focused and built for this, if they have Auspex 1, they get to keep attacking me.
Anyway, like we said, we're not going to keep doing these questions. Not that these aren't good questions. They're excellent. The problem is that they'd be the rest of the video. So what I will say is that when Jacob and I refer to the deep mysteries of Masquerade, this is one of them. And your life is better not knowing the others. So we're going to keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I've lots of other things I want to say about this, but I just can't let myself. Okay, so next we've got another one of Joe's choices, which is the Harbinger of Grace. Keep the comments coming, by the way, because we'll come back and
we'll
read all of these, but we're going to actively avoid responding to them because we really want to. So Harbinger of Grace, one of the ones that Joe wants to talk about as one of the most beautiful and glorious buffs ever given to a healer in the universe.
Yeah, so... It's no secret. I'm playing a what am I looking for here? Salubri Healer in the next Sabbat Chronicle in WPI, which is only one game right now. If you want to play Sabbat Chronicle, let me know. We'll hook you up. Anyway,
WPI.
I'm planning to play a healer because it's a concept. It's a character I've never played before. In general, the only time I play healers is in like Overwatch style games. It's a super tactical job, and I love tactical jobs. There's a lot of good to that, but the point really just comes down to I'm playing a healer and I'm excited about it. So when I saw the buffs and the interesting mechanical things that happen to healers in this book, I got really excited. And this is the second biggest one. So this one, spend a point of blood in your simple action to assume the appearance of a divine embodiment of mercy from a culture with which you are familiar. While this is active, stock NPCs of 4 or lower can't attack you, even if they're not religious. In addition, they believe you are serving a divine purpose, and you may beatify a target by spending a simple action to make a noticeable gesture of blessing toward her. Thereafter, for as long as you have this power active, you do not have to spend blood to activate beneficial powers that target her, such as Corpore Sano or Shepherd's Watch. You can only affect one target with Harbinger of Grace at a given time. Should you target another character, the effects of this power end immediately. This is so fucking cool. I have trouble addressing all the ways. So first of all, the whole thing of stock NPCs can't attack you because they think you're on a divine mission that they feel compelled to stand aside from. That's a really cool touch because it's different from basically all of the other people can't hurt you things. All of those are you entrance them or you control them or you force them not to do things. This instead gives you the ability to just make them want to help you. They're just on your team. And that affects so many questions. As a storyteller, that has so many cool implications for roleplay, for Masquerade breach questions, all of that. Beyond that, when we just talk about the sheer mechanics of this, the stock NPC thing, cool. As I mentioned, stock NPCs are a lot better in a low XP Chronicle, so that's great. Much more importantly is that target someone and you can use beneficial powers on them. Because, and this is something that I don't know if it's an editing mistake or if it's how they intended the power to work. Stock NPCs are specifically called out as not being able to attack you, but the beatification is not called out to target only stock NPCs. You can just target someone with that. which means you can hit another player with that effect, and then you just stand next to them with Corpore Sano, and for no blood cost, heal them every single action you have available. That is incredible. That is massive. That is an unbelievable benefit. And it's something, healers are already really dangerous to the meta of the game, which is why healers are and should be exceptionally rare. But when you add that, healers aren't just dangerous to the meta of the game. If you don't have a responsible player running your healer, they will eat your NPCs for breakfast. And I've been wargaming this out for 3 days now, and I can tell you flat out, a crew of 5 vampires with 1 healer, all at about 200 XP, can thug the average Methuselah. And I'm not exaggerating in any way.
We're going to have to rerun the APOC simulation.
Healing is a massive fucking deal. And this power makes it massiver. There you go.
I don't have anything to say about this, except that it's really cool. And I don't think we flagged the warrior version, but one of the excellent things that this book did is every technique that the healer got, the warrior got a reflection of it, which is both just cool in terms of flavor, but also
mechanically, it's such a
beautiful.
Good touch. Again, for all the things that we say are wrong with this book, some of the decisions that were made are truly inspired, and that's one of the best.
And for the record, liking mechanics does not mean we don't care about flavor. Mechanics trump flavor when you're trying to figure out what happens, but flavor is really cool. We will absolutely make characters just based on the ability to fire off divine lightning. It's fucking awesome. I don't have anything to add to that. You covered everything I wanted to talk about. Shannon?
Yeah. I always love things that are for Salubri, and it makes it harder and harder for me to give up Joan.
For the record, that is one thing. A lot of the stuff in this book was love being given to the rare clans that needed it. Salubri did not need it. They
were fine.
Healers maybe need.
No, healers were fine. Shepherd's Watch is
You're right. You're right.
Beta by itself.
Salubri did not need help. They got it, and it's really cool. And it's not going to be unbalancing because of how many restrictions there are on when and where you can be a Salubri and survive. But Salubri were really good, and they got better.
In terms of just net power, as far as we can understand of the meta right now, without a lot of experience in it yet, in terms of raw power, the Salubri, the Malkavians, and probably the Bruja right now
And the Assamites.
are kind of sitting at the top of the pyramid in a pretty substantial way. There are some exceptions to that. There are very, very specific builds from other clans that are the best in class. But when you're talking about the average character, those 4 clans are kind of running the shop right now. That's not a criticism. There will always be some amount of difference in efficacy of a given clan. But it's very noticeable because that was not the list before this book came out.
Yeah. And again, the Salubri have inherent setting restrictions on them. And if you don't think that setting restrictions can prevent a clan from ruling the universe, ask yourself when the last time a caitiff was prince.
Kate, not only are they still the best minion mancers, they're much better at it. You'll never hear me talk about where they place in the rankings because pet builds are an abomination and I hate them. And fuck them.
Nosferatu are decent competitors if you go for that sort of thing. Okay, so that was Harbinger of Grace. Obviously, the counterpart is Harbinger of Vengeance.
Which is also really good. We just didn't flag it, so definitely check it out.
It's a reflection. It's sexy. Okay, so next we're going to talk about one of my choices, which is Manic Episode, because I always love giving some love to the Malkavians.
And this is a goddamn good one.
Once purchased, this power is always active, which is a great way to start any fucking technique.
Whenever always on techniques are the light of my life.
Whenever you activate Celerity, your initiative increases by the sum of all of your derangement traits. Not just that, but when you choose to activate Celerity, you may choose to, instead of spending a blood, gain a derangement trait, which then adds to your initiative. So all you have to do to go first in combat is go fucking insane. But also, there might be a drawback. This is so beautiful. So this is really cool for Malkavians, just in general. Like, Malkavians were always good, and Malkavians were always great. And this book has caused Malkavians to ascend to one of the highest planes of excellence.
Yeah.
And there's not much else for me to talk about the specific power. This is just very good. So I'll point out that we've been talking about numbers getting bigger in general. One of the specific places where that's going to be most noticeable is initiative.
Yeah.
Because up until now, initiative had 3 things that buffed it. There was celerity, there was the fast weapon quality, and I'm sure there was another, but it was niche enough that it was prohibitively difficult to get. Initiative was hard to build for. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb was the ordinary thug has an initiative around 18 or so. People are asking about stacking derangement traits. It's just the number of derangement traits. It's not the highest number on a derangement. If you have 10 derangements and 2 traits on all of them, first, cool the fuck down. But second, yes, per rules as written, those all add.
It's also really important to notice, yeah, and that's what DJ just dropped in the chat. What's really important to notice here is this isn't like a tricky reading of the mechanic to give the player the advantage. The wording in the book is increases by the sum of all of your current derangement.
That is the intended reading.
Very, very obviously language meant to say if you have multiple derangements, they all work together.
But so it used to be that the meta of this game was the average thug is a little bit below 20 or above 20 if they're in high XP. And if you hit a 25 initiative, you probably wasted your XP on celerity techniques you didn't need for a +1 to initiative. Now, this is not the only initiative buff in this game. Initiative is going to get higher. And that's pretty good, because the fact that this is a demontation technique is suggesting that this is not going to be restricted to physical builds. This is great to pick up for physical builds. Physical builds are going to start buying demontation. But the people who suffered the most in terms of who goes last and doesn't fill attacker slots were social builds. And so tying an initiative bonus to one of the best social disciplines, I would argue the best social discipline in the game, is a strong decision on the part of the writers.
Yeah.
Shem?
There are so many Malkavians who end up going last because they are built for social, and then you're kind of stuck.
And then the one dude who bought up celerity where everyone else was holding out in hopes they'd get temporous gets to decide how that attacker slot is filled.
Yeah, which...
Joe? Oh.
Yeah. Can suck for people who are the social builds and are hiding in the back like, I would like to do a thing, please. So.
Joe?
So I'm going to dig a little bit into the philosophy of builds, because it's going to be really important for understanding. First of all, I love this power. It's amazing. It does so many cool things that I'm going to talk about. But to really understand why this power is so effective, it's kind of important to dig into the philosophy of builds in the BNS system. Because physical, mental, and social characters are all balanced against one another. The distinction being that physical characters are capable of doing more raw damage, are capable of hitting you more often, are capable of they're the builds that are normal. They're the easy build to understand. I just do ag, you take ag, and eventually you stop moving. Mental builds, generally speaking, are control builds in some way or another. They're built around understanding the battlefield better than anyone else, controlling the battlefield, sharing information, hiding information from your adversaries. They're tactical leadership builds. And so generally speaking, when a mental build goes out, every time a mental build takes an action, something dramatically happens on the field. Every physical action, something happens, but because physical actions are easier to get and easier to do, it's a much lower effect of a lower order of magnitude of the effect. mental actions are substantially more efficacious. For example, obviously there's Tyrant's Gaze, which can very easily make a fight unwinnable for one team. Obviously you've got things like Mass Manipulate, you have things like even Psychic Assault is a really big deal because of blood cost and things like that. All of those go together to say that mental powers and mental builds are very tactically effective. Social builds are what I call don't get off the couch builds. Most of the social powers in this game shift the nature of the battle in an extremely dramatic way. Chemistry more than almost any other. Chemistry is a power that a lot of people think sucks, and I consistently rate as one of the top 3 to 5 powers of this game. You have the ability to modify the battlefield, to control lines of sight, to control movement, to change actions. You can save people with this power, and you can kill them with it too. Chemistry is incredible. And it's honestly not the only great social power. Melpomene can shut down entire battlefields. Demontation, Total Insanity, is actually the one power from the BNS book, core book, that I think is too good and should be nerfed for what it does to combat. Just flat out, when a social character acts, the nature of what you're doing changes, which is why I don't really give a shit that social characters don't usually get to act. When I roll in with a social character, my expectation is I'm going to sit back with the other social character, and while you're all dirtying your hands, violencing one another, like, oh, look at that, good show. And then if it gets to us, and we're like, oh, you require my attention. And then I just eat your family. That's what's cool about social builds. Social builds are socially cooler. So their effects are rare, but dramatic. So again, that's the philosophy of these builds. It's really important. So what's cool about this power is that it gives those builds the ability to impact combat more often. What's balancing about it, and what I love about it, is that its incentive is tied very deeply in with a drawback. Instead of a lot of powers where like the drawback is you lose your maximum willpower, or like your cousin marries you, or some weird fucking nonsense happens. This is a power whose,
definitely a Giovanni power.
This is a power whose drawback is intricately and intimately tied in with its benefit. So it's one of those things where you have to ask, how many derangements can I fucking handle? And a lot of people are like, oh, a bunch. Nuh-uh. It's really, really easy to give people derangement traits. And as soon as people find out one of yours, they'll eat you for breakfast. So having lots of derangements is very dangerous, assuming you're playing the game in good faith and actually playing your character sheet. So that's a really big deal. So that's why I'm okay with this power, even though to me it really represents one of the other major paradigmatic shifts in the meta of this game. Because it is so intimately tied in with its drawback that at any given moment, it's maybe not worth doing. You're never really sure if it's a good idea to use this power. You know you're going to get a great benefit and you're going to fuck someone's week up, but you also know that the more you feed it, the more fed it gets. And I love it. It's exactly how I wish every drawback in every game was designed. This is a flawless power, and I'm so happy they added it to the game.
Absolutely.
Also, big thing that this does is it really incentivizes not waiting for Temporis.
Yeah.
Because you get celerity, and I think it just drives home all the more that 9th Gen and Blow should not wait for Temporis.
Yeah.
Because you can't use it.
I've been bitching about the fact that the scales were, in my opinion, decently balanced between celerity and Temporis, and they were giving Temporis extra things. So it would be disingenuous of me to not acknowledge that, yeah, they also went ahead and walked up to social builds and said, hey, celerity is also pretty attractive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus,
so that was,
you can do this now.
So that was Manic episode. Next we've got one of Joe's, another healer buff, Martyr's Defiance.
This power is my shit! I fucking love this power. This power, it's right here on the right. This power is crazy good. It's so goddamn good, you guys. You have no idea. Spend 1 point of blood on a simple action to activate Martyr's Defiance. For the next 5 turns, you extend a layer of mystical protection over willing allies within 3 steps of you. Whenever one of the allies within your sphere of protection is harmed, you may choose to voluntarily accept all the damage from that attack without the need for the assist defender mass combat tactic. Here's what you need to understand about that. that power saves hundreds to thousands of points of experience. So when you're building a crew, when you're building a hit squad, when you're building a coterie, whatever you choose to call your group of people who group together and murder folks, one of the things you do is build together. You build for synchronicity, you build for synergy. So you come up with powers and you spend XP in such a way that your builds complement one another, cover one another's weaknesses, and reinforce one another where they need reinforcement. This power does that better than any 3 powers in the game combined. What it means is, you buy Fortitude, and none of your crew has to buy Fortitude anymore. That's 60 XP if it's an out-of-clan, 45 if it's or 42 if it's an in-clan. Which is to say, you're saving your whole crew 40 or more XP. That is the biggest that's the biggest economic save of XP you can possibly get in the system. It is incredible. Now, how do you mitigate that problem? Well, the thing about Salubri already is that they have that healer squad that they can very easily do with ghouls, and also just in general, their ability to soak damage is legendary. Even besides Fortitude, which should not be a besides thing, even besides Fortitude, their ability to heal themselves and their ability to, because of the fact that their build really doesn't need them not to have stamina, they have stamina, they can build rugged, they have so much health that they can spend on this, and so much sort of extra health because of healing and mitigating factors, that they can really soak damage and tank for a crew of 5 or 6 vampires without being in a whole lot of danger. The thing about Salubri always was that they were an unmovable object. But now that unmovable object has figured out how to give that benefit to other people. And that's a huge deal. Because now that unmovable object can move if it wants to.
Also, it's a great way to set up your team for your sudden but inevitable betrayal, and they don't have any fortitude.
I also love this, because one of the weaknesses of the Salubri healers particularly always was that their powers are great, but they're mostly kill on sight. Even in the Sabbat, healers are usually diablerized by warriors in what the warriors consider to be an act of mercy. So they're one of the clans, like True Bruja and Bali, that even if their powers are really, really good, they're kill on sight. And that's a really big deal, because if you only get to use it once, it better be a fucking showstopper. This power gives them enough mechanical skill and power that they can resist being a kill on sight build. If they get a crew of a couple loyal vampires willing to go against the crowd, they can show up to SBOT, and when that healer's like, hey, by the code of Samuel, I'm going to kill you. And they're like, are you really though? And then they'll just win. And that's a huge deal, because if you're supposed to be killed on sight, you need to have a way not to die. And I love this power for it.
That was something that I thought was going to be something that I brought up, but that you brought up, and I'll hammer in the point. We've talked about powers that are bad on PCs and good on NPCs. This is a power that's great on an NPC, on a PC, and just phenomenal on an NPC.
Devastating.
This is the mark of a good storyteller from now on, will be someone who only puts this on 1 in 5 groups that you face.
And
because it is so good.
And then they have, what is it, devious wound or whatever, the fake wound
Misleading
one.
wound.
Misleading wound. So they think, how much damage is I'm doing to these goddamn people?
It's such a huge benefit.
It is so good.
It's honestly impossible to overstate how effective that is for that healer.
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah,
I think
eye
that
open.
this being an Obeya-based technique would cause the eye to open. And if it didn't, this would be such an obvious use that if your storyteller didn't tell you, yeah, you know it's the Salubri, then they would tell you, yeah, you know this is some bullshit you've never seen before, and it's probably safe to kill it with fire no matter what. Okay, Shannon, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Next up, we have one of my techniques, which is Poisonous Will.
One day I will talk about another one of mine.
Someday. Shannon chose a lot of the ones that end with R below, that start with R below. So, Poisonous Will takes two powers that were always good, but never quite good enough. And that is Animalism 3 and Quietus 3. Animalism 3 is, of course, Quell the Beast. Decent power. Limit willpower spend or make willpower spend restrictive and take people out of frenzy. And for the record, I think that taking people out of frenzy is going to become a lot more popular after some of the mechanics in this book than it was in last book. And Dagon's Call. And we've got some dozen viewers right now. I would be surprised if more than two of them remembered what Dagon's Call does. Dagon's Call is a mental challenge that causes you to take 2 unsoakable normal damage when you spend blood at a limit of once a turn. These are both good effects. There's no denying that both of those things are good things to have happen. The problem is that, generally speaking, they were not worth the slot they were taking up. Why quell and say you're going to lose out on some of your willpower when I can hit you with TI and strip away all of your mental and social foci and turn you off or force you to run away or give you a -5 to all tests? Why hit you with some unsoakable normal when you spend blood when I could hit you with Dominate and take away your character?
And that's where the thing about animalism was always, it's the social challenge that thugs threw when they needed to throw a social challenge.
What Poisonous Will does is very neatly, very elegantly solves that problem with the very simple effect of when you succeed on one of these two powers, you succeeded on the other. If I hit you with either Quietus 3 or Animalism 3, I automatically get a normal success on the other. For no additional cost, without having to declare that's what I'm doing ahead of time, as soon as I get a success, and whether it's a normal success or an exceptional success, doesn't matter, I can automatically apply the effects of the other one without taking up an attacker slot, which was always the primary problem. These powers were not worth the attacker slots they were going to take up. And by having both of the effects apply, I think we are going to start to see both of these powers used a lot more often. This is a lot of nice things. And especially noticeable is the additional little effect where there was a mechanic that allowed you to apply Dagon's Call at range. I think it was associated with, like, Quietus something. Who cares? Point is, there is a way to hit someone with Dagon's Call outside of your line of sight, which you never wanted to do because it was normal damage when they were far away from you and you didn't matter. But now, you're hitting them for a mental effect and a social effect while you're pursuing them. It's still limited, still not enough on its own, but it's something that you might start to be interested in doing, and on top of the primary effect, which I'm in love with. Yep. Shannon?
I don't really have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, the thing I want to address here is that it represents such a great idea. They took two powers, both of which had good, meaningful effects, but were never quite worth the opportunity cost, and they reduced the opportunity cost just enough in one avenue and increased it via XP, so that it's very, very tightly balanced, and it's not that either of those powers exactly got better, it's just that they got usable more often. And it's just, yeah, this was artistic.
And on top of that, it's worth pointing out real quick for Quell. One of the primary things we've observed in this new meta is that willpower is cheaper.
Much.
And it used to be a common idea that unfocused Quell was better than focused Quell. One of the few cases where you did not want the focus. Because focused Quell prevents you from spending willpower at all, but unfocused Quell doubled the cost of willpower retests. So if you hit them with focused Quell, They just kept all their willpower, and they resisted mental and social powers normally at their full resistance. If you hit them with unfocused quell, they got 3 retests, and now they don't get retests, and they're resisting at a 10. With the fact that willpower is much cheaper, and the fact that spending 2 willpower for 1 retest is not necessarily as prohibitive as it used to be, we may be at a point where focused quell is better.
So I won't go that far. I think there are definitely things that make willpower cheaper. I think that those things are limited enough in scope that it's not cheap yet. It's much less dramatic. There are a lot of situations now where people will retest that they wouldn't have before. Attacks obviously are one of the main examples. Physical dodge, physical resistance is another big one that's going to happen. So you're going to see people use willpower where they wouldn't before, which means this is likely to have a more dramatic cost on them because of that. But I think that enough builds, I probably still barely the majority of builds won't have extra willpower stacks, means that having unfocused is still a big deal. Now, what I will say and very easily concede is that focused got much, much better.
It's a much
substantially
fuzzier line.
better. Yeah, I would say that there's probably, it's close to parity. Like I said, I think barely the majority of builds will not have willpower stacks. So I think just barely unfocused is still better, but it's one of the, it's you don't really need to argue your case no matter which side you pick. Either one, I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, that's a good idea. And that's what this power really is great for. Cool.
Okay. So next we've got one of Joe's. I'm sorry, Shannon. You'll get a whole marathon later.
Yeah. Shannon is the last half.
Oh no, wait. No one chose. Okay, no.
Yep.
Yes. One of yours. Primal Gaze. Right. Can't scroll down anymore. All right. So.
There you go.
Yep.
So this power, if you use the protean power shape of the beast to assume a fight form, you can choose to appear as an especially commanding specimen, gaining a +3 bonus to your leadership and intimidation. I love this power. This power is amazing. What this power means is that you, Mr. Ventru, are better at everything you're good at if you're a animal. Note that it's specifically your fight form, which I think is fascinating. The traditional fight forms like wolf, bear. That's it. So there's
you had a gorilla once.
I did have a gorilla that I disguised as a demon.
Raccoon.
Point is, I love the idea of someone going into a fight as the genteel leadership type with a suit and tie, and he's got Paragon because it's one of the most amazing merits ever. So he has an attendant Ventru following him. Yes, very good, sir. Quite, sir. Yes, sir. Well, very good, sir. And then they get to the battle, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at Mr. Dandy." And Mr. Dandy's like, "Yes, well, Jeeves, please take the fine china and my watch. I'll be back in a moment." Bear. It's incredible. Imagine the look on the other team's face. Now imagine they're like, here's their social. Why is he a giant? What? Why? Huh? It's so incredibly beautiful. And there are great ways to dominate, use command in animal form. Gestures still work. So you can still do really dramatic dominate effects. But you also have things like Dread Gaze gets a bonus. So you turn into a wolf and you're like, hey, I'm even more fucking no thank you.
Fucking love.
Love gets a bonus. You just walk in there as this mangy ass wolf and they're like, I would die for that wolf. Which is how people actually behave. I love this power. It's so beautiful. It's so ridiculous.
Mr. Barrington.
Mr. Barrington. If you've never heard of Mr. Barrington, look up D&D Mr. Barrington. It's the greatest legend of all time. Okay, I think that's all we really need to say about this power. It's beautiful and I love it.
There's also a wild card bonus to your dodge.
You can add your subterfuge dots to your dodge if you're in flight form. It's flight form, so it was always a dodge buff, but this is one of the few cases where the numbers are getting bigger in terms of defense instead of offense.
This is something
that's
really,
nice to call out.
What this honestly does, besides the really ridiculous joke I was making there, which does actually work, what this does is this even more dramatically makes Gangrel some of the most amazing jack-of-all-trades builds that exist in this game. Because with this power, you can easily have a Gangrel that has a really great offensive build with a social mental split backup, and in cases of need to get away, need to fair escape, has a better dodge than most average thugs. It's such a great toolbox build. It can adjust to an almost infinite array of situations, and this power is a really dramatic boost for the Gangrel.
Yeah, so for the record, guys, we're talking a lot about the changes to the meta. One of those changes has not been lucky number 17.
Nope.
You still need to hit 17 on your mental or social in order to be relevant on it in mass combat. There are lots of ways to refresh your willpower. There are not many ways to push it above the base of 6. So the average person who is focused on not what you're hitting them on is still resisting at max at a 16. What has changed, and what we very clearly see in this, is that it's gotten a lot easier to hit 17.
What I will note additionally is, yes, probably several of you will address there are defensive boosts built into this, and there are. The difference is that, as Jacob has referenced a couple of times, a lot of the attack boosts and a lot of the offensive boosts are generic. They apply to whatever you're doing. They're very easy to mold to a situation. Most, if not all, of the defensive buffs, besides healing being fucking amazing, most, if not all, of the general defensive buffs are very specific. So even if you come into this and you're like, oh yeah, I have one of the alchemical metals from before when we were talking about that technique, you've got a boost against my dominate, but because of this, I can hit you with my presence powers, my leadership-based powers. So it's, even though there are builds that will get you above a 17 on very key defenses, there aren't builds that will generically get you past that point, and that's really important.
It's also definitely become easier to overbid on dominate.
Substantially, yes.
Okay, I think that's all we have to say about Primal Gaze. So next, oh boy.
I know everybody's been looking forward to this one.
This is one of the top 5 techniques in this book. We will talk about Press-Ganged Coven, which is one of the places where needed mechanical reform meets with good mechanics, meets with cool flavor, meets with badass name to create just one of the best techniques in either of the books.
It's a perfect storm.
So, Press-Gang Coven is a technique where you can either take Thaumaturgy 3 or Necromancy 3 of any path and dominate 4. What you are doing is you are conditioning a mortal with a specific mesmerism. That mesmerism instructs them to, when you use a Thaumaturgy or Necromancy power, they will perform some act, utter an arcane word, perform a ritually significant action, and they will behave in such a way that allows them to assist attacker in one of the 2 written-in breaches to the standard rules on assist attackers. We skipped the first one. It was a way to have your animals boost your social actions, and we don't care about it.
That's not to say that's not good, it's just...
We don't really care.
The last video was 4 hours long.
There are 2 exceptions to the standard rule. The first is that they're allowed to assist attack on non-physical actions. They are assist attacking on Thaumaturgy or Necromancy actions. The second way is that they're not capped at 1. You can have a number of NPCs equal to your occult dots aid you for a max, or you can have more aid you, but your max benefit is your occult dots. So for the record, if you're a thaumaturgist, skill focus occult is
It's actually
it's
good.
worth it. It's worth it.
It was already okay. Now it's good.
So this is an effective +5 to your thaumaturgy if you have 5 humans available who you have implanted with your conditioning. So let's talk about combat thaumaturgy. Everyone who signs up to play a Tremere at one point or another wants to be able to cast Fireball, because innately we all feel like it's cool, and we have been conditioned to expect any wizard worth their fucking salt needs to throw a Fireball at least once.
It's a small ball of bat guano in almost every system ever written. You burn it, it burns everybody else. Get to work.
The problem is that Fireball, and all of its variations in thaumaturgy and necromancy, is your mental pool versus your physical pool. And that means that you're going to be bidding something like a 17 or an 18 or a 19 against their 25. You are losing ties. The physical slot that you are taking up is not worth what a Bruja or an Asimite could be doing with that slot. Which means that there's a very simple problem to solve. In order to make standard combat thaumaturgy, not thaumaturgy that's boosting your brawl skills, because that's absolutely valid, if a little tricky to put together, PM us if you'd like a 3-hour rant on that. In order to make combat thaumaturgy valid, and we're only going to talk about valid today, because we still don't know if it's a good yet. In order to make it valid, you have to be able to get the bid into the mid-20s, because that's the point at which you are winning ties against at least the average 9th gen who you desperately need to kill. This does that. Take a standard 8th gen Tremere, and let's say they really care about this, so they take just Lure of Flames, they take Skill Focus for Occult 6, that's 13 mentals, Occult 6 for 19, Occult 6 again from this technique for 25. You can now throw a Fireball at someone and win on ties if they aren't a dodge-focused 7th gen. Depending on the XP, obviously. But this technique also has built-in limitations. If I see a Tremere walking around with 6 mortals standing behind him in black cloaks, I don't even need thaumaturgy lore. I'm going to start by killing those guys. Which is debilitating, and part of that is going to go into whether or not combat thaumaturgy is good or not. There are ways around that. Lots of strategizing is going to go into this. Point is, we are now at a point where if you throw a lightning bolt, I cannot immediately discount your character. I have to acknowledge the fact that, hey, you can do something. And yeah, like Ob10, there are many ways to just auto-kill these mortals who are boosting your thaumaturgy.
We might do a later video. Actually, if this ends up being something we keep doing, like wargaming videos like that would be a lot of fun. But we can't, that's a rabbit hole.
And then just the final note I'll make before passing it on, because I've talked way too long about this one already. This is just so cool. Beyond anything else, as a thaumaturge, you have a fucking cabal of mortals who are chanting behind you so that your lightning bolt is better. This is so badass.
It's just...
Joe, I imagine you have some opinions.
It's even the Russian judge gives this one 10 out of 10. It is just so cool in so many ways. What's great about it is, yes, the people watching it, yeah, you're absolutely a bazillion times right. It is easy to kill those mortals. But the thing is, those aren't necessarily retainers. Those are just stock NPCs who you have inflicted with conditioning. You can do that pretty quickly if you build for it.
Hey, what did Tremere have in clan?
Point is... Yeah, that was weird, I know. Point
Never
is...
do that again.
These are minions who are easily replaced, which changes the calculus on them dramatically. So now, again, it's not just that they do this. This is what they're doing while you're casting an everyman. They're still active NPCs that can do other shit with their time. So this is something that takes what's already a good build, which is the group of basically mini-thoms walking behind you, and makes it a better build. Now you may have noticed, that's a pet build. Yes, I hate pet builds, but this power is so goddamn awesome, it makes me like that pet build. Because it's cool. It's not a group of wolves following you in, it's these creepy dudes in cloaks. And my most wonderful idea for a Tremere is this super normal Tremere who's like, yeah, I do magic. And then this creepy Cthulhuan cult following him around, just chanting and sacrificing people completely without his input. And this power makes funny, ridiculous shit like that possible, and that's such a mark in its favor that I can forgive it for fundamentally being a pet build, even though I want every pet build to be shot twice in the back of the head execution style by the Mafia.
I'm gonna be honest, my favorite for this isn't a Tremere. My favorite for this build is a Ventru. You take thaumaturgical training and aura of command, and you just fill out a downtime every month for a straight year. I am conditioning every person in the city with this build.
You just have warehouses full of people to buff your thumb.
And now I walk around in I just make sure to always be around mortals, and eventually you jump me, and I throw thaumaturgy, and 4 mortals in the crowd just say a word and go,
some grandma
why did I
turns
say
and starts
that?
casting shit.
I love it so good. Bill, I'll kill you.
What?
I'll kill you.
Stingy
I'll
man.
just kill you.
Rolling on.
Shen, do you have anything to say on this?
I'm good.
Cool. Okay. We're gonna not talk about that anymore. And I'm talking about what's going on in the comments right now. What we've got next is one of Joe's techniques. Quick hands, quick work. Auspex 2 and Celerity 2.
So this is a power that's not great out of the gate. You choose to activate this when spending your downtimes. If you do, you get 2 additional downtimes. But the cost is that when you show up to game, you have half your normal blood pool maximum. Which is to say that you basically show up to your next game super low on blood. So it's kind of a rough trade. There are ways to refuel pretty quickly now, so it's not a horrible trade, but it can be a pretty rough one. People who know you use this, people who are tracking your downtimes or paying attention to what you do, could use that as the opportunity to hit you. As soon as you walk in the game, hammer drops. So that's a serious drawback. That being said, this synergizes horrifyingly with the Malkavian merit that lets them spend their downtimes retroactively. Because what this does is it takes what is already the most amazing power you could probably have in this system and adds to it pretty effectively. So now it's not just in 3 situations you can have prepared flawlessly for it. Now it's in 5 situations. And if you are in a game where you are in more than 5 situations where a retroactive downtime wouldn't let you kick an angel in the dick, you suck at vampires. Stop doing that. I like this power.
I feel like we can just move on from there. I will say, they were smart about the restrictions they placed on this, and they bothered to make sure to tell you explicitly, you cannot do anything to make up for the blood cost.
Oh, also,
how much
for Adam in the comments? Mythocaria and the one cam merit that gives you downtimes back.
Yeah, there are a lot of sources of downtimes. This is not even a 50% increase if you decide to focus in them.
You can do so many
like,
downtimes.
Computers,
science.
Like it's got to be specific.
But so how
downtime.
how to penalize blood spend in downtime, if you're doing something that excessively spends blood, has always been a bit of a question mark. And this is the first sort of ruling we've had on it from BNS. This might give a degree of precedent. Be very careful. For other things that are intense blood spends. And it's a well thought out and very heavily penalizing restriction.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up actually, because as Jacob noted, trying to figure out what is the drawback of spending blood in downtime is a serious challenge as a storyteller. Because fundamentally, it's really, really easy to just say, hey, I grab somebody off the street, fucking drain them dry, and roll the body down an alley. It's the world of darkness, that shit happens. So that's always been a serious challenge as an ST to give a logical enforcement. So what this does is, as Jacob kind of alluded to and mentioned, is that this creates a precedent. This creates a very easy place to reference back to and say, okay, cool. This is saying when you have to use all of that blood, you're showing up to the game with half your max. So even though the situations aren't identical, this gives you a really, really good place to make your judgment call from, which if you can't have a perfectly explicit mechanic, is a pretty good silver medal.
And for the record, that's why I want storytellers to spend a lot of time reading the book. It's not because they need to know every mechanic. They don't. The book's available. People will remember different things.
We've proven in these videos we don't remember all the mechanics. Generally speaking, if I don't remember it, it's not a good mechanic, but we don't remember all of them.
What's useful in reading widely within these systems is that it means you know where to turn to when you need to answer an unresolvable question. Generally, people who are really into mechanics, who will object when you make one up whole cloth, are going to be a lot more reasonable when you point at something already established in the game and say, there's not a good answer to this, but here's a case that's kind of similar, and I'm going to draw on that for how we're going to handle this scenario. Okay, next up we've got one of mine, Rend Flesh, which I really
love vicissitude.
I really just chose because I love vicissitude, and I've always thought that flesh crafting was better than it got credit for. So, Malleable Visage is Vicissitude 1, and it allows you to change your appearance. And Flesh Crafting, Vicissitude 2, allows you to change the appearance of other people. And that's all that most people remember about it. Because that's a really good power. Being able to change other people's appearances is fucking character defining. Especially if it's in Cam, not Sabat. But Fleshcraft has another effect, which is that it can be used as an attack, grabbing someone and fucking around with their flesh to deal 2 unsoakable normal damage as a brawl attack. 3 if it's an exceptional. The primary limit to this, and the reason that most people don't use it, is it cannot be upgraded in any way by any other discipline. It doesn't get bonuses from transformative powers, it doesn't do more damage from potents, it gets nothing. I put it on a lot of characters. I used it once or twice as an option for when Fortitude was being a bitch. I think it was a good fallback. But most people did not use it. And that is sort of the defining statement. If people do not use a mechanic, then that is proof that that mechanic has not worked. So all they had to do to fix it was a very nice little simple technique, which is to say, potence 1 through 3 applies. Now not only is that making it armor piercing, which is huge on its own, that's an effective +3 to the attack. +4?
What?
Whatever.
Yeah.
Not only is that +1 damage, so that's 3 crit 4 unsoakable normal, Not only is that a +5 to confirm crit, which you're not boosting it with your transformative still, but now you're working at a reasonable pool, you may crit the mental socials that you're attacking. But Potence 1 means that you're benefiting from the strength focus. So for the first time, you are boosting the pool past just your physical plus brawl. This is exactly what flesh crafting needed in order to be certainly not your primary method of attack, but especially in a low XP game where Fortitude 5 shuts down a lot of possible attackers. Instead of pushing your potence all the way to 5 just to deal with those people, you can buy Vicissitude to 2, mostly in a Sabbat game, and then focus on some other things so that you're throwing around just Potence 3 in a very low XP game, and then when you run up against someone who has high Fortitude, now you start to throw Fleshcraft. I love this. I've always wanted Fleshcraft to be an option. I'll admit, though, Fleshcraft has always been my baby, so I don't necessarily know whether this actually makes it good or whether I'm just excited any time it gets attention. Shannon?
Probably the second one.
Joe? Make me feel good.
So, I'm going to tell a very, 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 very brief story. A couple years ago now, I guess, I ran a Sabbat Chronicle in Baltimore. And Jacob played a Malkavian with comfortably the weirdest build I've ever seen. When he submitted the sheet for approval, Rob Paul, who was our regional storyteller at the time, wrote back, "This sheet looks like it was built by a Malkavian." This was a Malkavian that had all demontation, had vicissitude, had
Path of
Path of Blood. Weird fucking sheet.
13 physicals, 11 mentals, 11 socials.
It was a mental, social, physical character.
But the thing of the build was that he just flat out could not afford potence. Or fortitude, I think. Yeah, which was a pretty important deal. But this build was incredibly effective in single combat. It was pretty, I would say, if not definitely, certainly in the very close running for the best assassin build I've ever seen. And the reason for that was it had this flesh crafting for attack, because he had very little physical offense to work with. But flesh crafting was unsoakable normal, which functions as a blood tax, which when you're operating at 600 XP, blood tax is a huge deal. When you're operating at 600 XP and your weird fucking sheet has Path of Blood on it, which gives you more blood, and also you've gamed the system so you get a bloodbath all the time, you have an impossible amount of blood, which makes a blood tax on your opponent a huge combat effector. So this is a really good power in specific circumstances. It's not a power that I would say is great all the time, but if it's good for you, it's fucking amazing for you.
And one of the best things about it is that you just get it naturally on the way to picking up other things. Joe talked in the beginning about what his design philosophy is, which is very similar to mine, which is that we both like to build toolboxes. And Fleshcraft is a pretty specific tool, but it's an excellent one. There are times when you just need your damage to be unsoakable, and now that is a lot more obtainable, a much more valid option than it used to be.
It's in a lot of ways like Psychic Assault, and Psychic Assault has always been great as a blood tax. And what this is a lower average damage than Psychic Assault, but it's a physical attack, so you can do it in celerity. So it's a really, really good parallel to that, where you only get to do 3 unsoakable, but you do it a lot of times. No. And that's a really big deal on that blood tax.
I'm gonna check real quick, but I think it might cost a blood. Yeah, so it does cost a blood. So you're probably in 9th gen if you're taking this. You're not throwing it every celerity attack, but you have options.
And go back to that book real fast. Okay, yeah, you're good. Yeah, so it's 1 blood and a symbol to make your attack, but that's still a really big deal. Oh, that's the other thing that we forgot to mention. It's a simple to attack this way.
No.
That's standard.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Sorry, it's not. I'm full of shit.
No. Yeah. So Joe's just a liar.
Ooh, my brain about melted. I was like, wait, why don't I always do that?
Okay. We've got one of Shannon's.
I swear to God, we all have the same number. She just backloaded hers a lot.
All right, we've also got another one of my typos. This is resplendence of the supple form. I wrote resplendence of the supply form. I like mine better. Shannon.
All right. So
Remember to describe the power before talking about it.
Oh, thank you, George. Bonecraft is a simple to attack.
There you go.
Thank you. I knew there. Okay, yeah.
All right. So this power is whenever you're doing changing somebody's face to give them, say, the appearance focus. You're so much better at vicissitude that instead of doing a -3 penalty to your social attribute, you only do -1 for malleable visage. And for bone crafting, you can create an extra limb with only losing a single health level instead of losing more. Is it 2 or 3?
I think
it's more.
It's more. So the big thing is it lowers the penalties that you would take for vicissitude. And I think that's a pretty decent thing because that's something that you come across a lot where you might not want to take the appearance or you might not want to take a different focus because to get the appearance focus for things, you have to give up some of your social attribute, therefore making it a little bit easier to hit you. DJ is saying it's -2. Not -3.
Whatever penalty it is, it's reduced to a -1.
Yeah. So, it makes it easier for people to pick up this focus or this extra benefit. There's not as many drawbacks, which comes in a lot when you're talking about like balancing your sheet. So.
Yeah, I really like this. Bone crafting has always been a really cool power that didn't get used very often because the benefits were not worth the penalties. Every bone crafting comes with penalties, and I think that's good, but the penalties were too much. One cool decision that was made with this technique is it does not enhance your use of bone crafting. So this is not the one guy takes bone crafting and this technique and can give better bone crafting to everyone. This is you are better at resisting, at handling bone crafting. So you can get benefits from anyone who has it, whether it's you or someone else giving it to you. I think that's a neat note, and I think it was a good decision if they'd made it the other, then one person would be known for handing out bone crafting benefits. And now, there's a problem here that should make it into feedback, because this does not feel like the intended reading, which is what this text says is whenever you are targeted by vicissitude powers such as malleable visage or bone craft, you can reduce penalties. A vicissitude power that has some very noticeable penalties is horrid form.
Yep.
And this does not, and explicitly, this applies to vicissitude powers that are targeting someone else or are targeting you. Right. Only penalty, whether it comes from vicissitude from someone else or from you. So when you are the target of your own horrid form, and yes, you are absolutely the target of your own horrid form, a straight reading of this power would say you only take a -1 to your mental and social attribute. That does not feel like the intended reading, And that feels like a very, very strong buff to Horrid Form. So I'm sending that in with my feedback.
And the same for
Adam, no, it does specify that it's a penalty to attribute traits or health levels.
There's
Damage
a distinction
is
between
not-
a penalty to health and damage.
Yeah, so that it would not apply to Fleshcraft on a straight reading.
So I
or
want to
just getting
address.
punched.
So yeah, Joe, you're up next.
I agree this is a huge buff to Horrid Form. I disagree that it was an accident. Reading this power, whenever you are targeted by vicissitude powers such as Malleable Visage or Bonecraft, there aren't many more effects you can be targeted by. So
Blood.
Yeah.
it would only make sense if it was trying to restrict you to those, it would be you are the target of Malleable Visage or Bonecraft, not powers such as that. And yes, to address the question, Alex, it's pretty confident that transformative is you targeting yourself with a power.
All
Powers that
powers-
affect yourself are powers that target you.
All powers have a target. Most powers target the user.
Yeah.
Some powers target another designated target.
It is possible for an ST to rule differently, but that ST would be
Now, one interesting piece of language is that this technique specifies that it limits the penalties applied by any applicable vicissitude power to a single attribute trait. And Horrid Form is a penalty to 2 attribute traits. And so I'm not...
So it's definitely
I
true
would
that
have to
this-
sit down and go through to figure out exactly how to educate that.
My reading on that would probably be it would be a single trait to the attribute because of the fact that a single attribute trait or health level, it's suggesting that whatever the penalty is, the number is reduced to 1. That said, that is a much more litigatable... Wow, I got through that word on one try.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you. Anyway, point is, I think that that's a tricky reading. Anyway, really good power, even if that reading doesn't hold out in the final product. How did I fuck up product?
Here's an interesting question. Real
My
quick.
wings, I flew too close to the sun.
Bonecraft with the focus can give you 2 of the benefits, right?
Yep.
So the line, you may choose to limit the penalties applied by any applicable vicissitude power to a single attribute trait or health level. That sounds like you're getting 2 benefits from Bonecraft, you get to limit 1 of them. Does that sound like that to you?
I think it would be you limit the effect of each of them in that way.
Each effect?
Yes.
Because it does specify...
Not total
applicable
effect, but each
power.
effect. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll have to think about this
But
power.
yes, this is definitely a power that is difficult to read objectively.
Give us your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested in reading them.
And going to what George said with removing limbs,
That is not a numeric penalty.
It's also worth noting that this is in any reasonable reading by an ST, setting aside litigious readings, this is clearly saying when you're getting a benefit, the penalty is reduced. That's not something that's going to be applied to your enemies. That's just not a logical reading or an interpretation of what a power like this would be for.
Now,
I
by
think
all
it just
means,
means you turn into 1 limb.
by all
You're
means,
just a
George,
leg.
if it amuses you, go ahead and use vicissitude to take away all but 1 limb.
That's
a
fun.
fantastically cruel and amusing thing to do.
But yeah, as a storyteller, being objective and ruling a reasonable game, there's not really a reasonable interpretation of this that would say that.
Okay, so yeah, give us your comments on how you think this power should be interpreted, and we will respond to them later. Right now,
It's another one for
we
me.
will
We're
go
about to
to
start the Shannon Marathon.
We have entered Shannon's
What everybody
domain.
wants. I know.
Scalpel tongue.
Which... Okay, boys, you're live on TV.
Yeah, we do. It's a scalpel!
So,
Worse.
This power, he spends 1
Yeah,
blood,
it's worse, right?
and your standard action to make a biting remark.
Biting remark. Cutting remark.
Sorry. Go ahead, Shannon.
If you succeed in the challenge, your target is flabbergasted, full of rage, and unable to speak coherently for the next 5 minutes. I think this power sounds a lot cooler than it actually is, personally, because there are some really decent limitations that they put on this. For one thing, if we can scroll, I think it's the next page that has the. Oh wait, no. So it was in the old version.
Yeah.
So the big one is that Malpomene still works. The other one is that command still works because they can get out single words, they just can't get out a lot of words. So I think the best way I can think to like conflate two powers, this seems like a lot like monologue, where it seems like it's something that is cool and will stop people from doing things, but it doesn't. It's not nearly as good as one might think. Because really all it does is it stops Mesmerize. And maybe Dementation 4, where you have to string together like 5 words at least. So, yeah, it's not nearly as good as I think it wants to be. I guess maybe it's supposed to be more for the social game, because it specifically draws the line, Harpies and Keepers of Elysium are known to turn an occasional blind eye when this power is used against characters currently out of their favor. Which, if they're already out of their favor, you can already just, like, fuck with them. Like, those are status rules. Yes, I guess it does.
It does stop monologue. Good point. Well, do you have to be coherent for monologue? I'm not sure about that.
I would argue probably.
Probably, yeah. So...
No, it can... A target affected by this power can also use all forms of blood magic, so it doesn't stop Thom.
Yeah, which is weird, but...
I mean,
so
I guess you're already using, like, gibberish, kind of.
So, I have some very specific opinions on this. You know what? I'll hold off, Joe.
Sure. So, first of all, I love gasting people's flabber.
Oh, baby.
But yeah, this is one of those powers that I'm like, I could just do this with roleplay.
Yeah.
Like, I can just say something so fucked up that you can't reply. I'm great at that. So this is a weird mechanic to me for that reason.
Also, you can just drop quiet as one.
Yeah.
Now they can't no one hears them.
Yeah. I will say I think this power is a little better than you're giving it credit for being. One of the main things about Dominate that's really, really powerful is that it's one of those mental things that if you fail your first use, you still have a second use that's about as good. It's not quite as powerful, but it's still a backup, which is a really big deal. If I try to hit you with Mesmerism, and if my Mesmerism, for example, is kill my enemies, and I fail that, and then I come back to my next turn, I can just point at who I want dead and say kill, and use command. And it's written into Dominate, and it's a very easy interpretation for storytellers that you have to interpret Dominate reasonably based on what the person using it is doing and saying. You can't...
Don't be an in-universe rules lawyering dick.
Yeah, you can't try and contract your way out of it. So I think that's a pretty big deal because you're taking that away. You're in a lot of ways having the power of Dominate. That said, it doesn't shut down blood magic, which continues my ongoing crusade of trying to decide whether or not Serpentis augments blood magic. Not whether or not it does, whether or not it should based on the reading. But that's just a little detail of I really get frustrated that Thom requires chanting, but everything that would make chanting impossible is not actually stopping Thom. In the same way that being grappled doesn't stop from casting, even though you're supposed to have to move your hands. That's just one of those things where I understand mechanically why it's doing what it's doing, and I'm very frustrated at the language being used.
Yeah.
My last big point is that paragraph about Harpies and Keepers of Elysium are known to turn an occasional blind eye when this power is used against characters No. No. Harpies, maybe, if they suck. If you as a harpy have to declare to the entire court who are watching as you dress this person down that the only way you can defeat them in this social conflict is to resort to powers of the blood because you are an incompetent rhetorist, then you suck as a harpy, and everyone in that domain should have carte blanche to eat your soul. It is a terrible power for a harpy to use because it shows that you suck at being a harpy. Keepers of Elysium really shouldn't use this power because it's clearly an attack, and if you're a Keeper of Elysium, the only time where you'd have the option and the authority to use this power is on Elysium, where if you were to use a power like this, clearly makes you the fucking person who broke Elysium, and you suck as a Keeper of Elysium. Either way, the problem of that paragraph is that the two examples they gave are both really bad things to do.
So what I think they mean is that the...
So I'm
Let me finish the sentence.
Yeah.
And then it's your turn.
That it's when other people use them, the harpies don't, or Keepers of Elysium don't penalize the person who uses it.
a little bit better for a harpy, worse for a Keeper of
Yeah, because
Elysium.
you're letting people attack on...
It's worse.
Yeah.
You understand how that's worse, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay, Jacob, your turn.
Okay. I will give this power credit where credit is due, that we complain when powers are not well defined. And it's weird that thaumaturgy works here. Because sure, thaumaturgy does not convey meaning, but the understanding is that you are using deliberate chance. And if you are incapable of making coherent sense, it feels like you should be equally incapable of saying the magical word you meant to say. But whatever. I can excuse that because they stated outright, yes, you are still allowed to do this. They met the basic requirement of what can and cannot happen must be explicit. However, this power can be used in and out of combat. In combat, fine. If you use this for social PvP, fuck you. Fuck you. Using a power to make me stop playing the game is not interesting. It's not clever, and it reveals that you're a bad politician who doesn't belong in a social PvP game. Fuck you, play a different game. Using a test to make me not talk is boring and uninteresting and belongs in a different game. They're allowed to write it into the book, and I respect them less for doing it, but I respect you less if you rely on it. Fuck you.
Yeah. To expand on that part maybe a little bit more explicitly.
Kindly, perhaps.
Social conflict, roleplay conflict, is what makes LARP good. Mechanical conflict is really important because that is what enables social conflict. You have Louis XIV's inscribed on his cannons, the final argument of kings, right? There's this basic concept of violence exists to provide weight to social discussion. And so that's where you get into, that's why diplomats are important. It's not important that everyone agrees on what pork costs. It's important that nobody starts nuking each other over the cost of pork. And that's the thing about roleplay. So when you start throwing powers that are not just shutting down roleplay, which is already fucking frustrating, but powers that are actually designed really to humiliate the person you're roleplaying with. The thing that comes to example, I've had a couple of players who were in arguments and used dominate to make the other players say you're right and basically just surrender the argument. And I've told those players, if you do that again, you're not welcome at my game. Because that is a mechanically viable thing to do, and it is a fucking despicable social act. And that's the problem, is that you're taking away roleplay and you are essentially humiliating a character. Now, I do want to go back because there are a couple of people asking specific questions. If I say some shit to you, you say some shit to me, I say some shit to you, and you go, fuck you, total insanity, and then beat me to death, that's not what I'm talking about. That is a conversational conflict, escalating to a physical conflict, that's a story. If you just end the conflict, you end the social conflict with a power that I can't do anything about, that is you being a douche. Escalating is good, ending is bad. Sort of the core idea of, yes and.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll walk it back a step. This power is called Scalpel Tongue, and this has surgical use. If I want to prevent you for 5 minutes, if I need to buy 5 minutes of time before you get to reveal the crucial information or present the counter argument, I can accept this being used to buy me 5 minutes to get away with something. There are uses for this power, but this power is begging to be used by some snot-nosed jackass who doesn't belong playing a political character, but who thinks he's being clever by making you shut up so he can look cool for 5 minutes. Fuck that person.
It's not that there are no acceptable uses of this power. There are times where it would be dramatically appropriate to the scene for this to basically be the slap in the face with a glove that escalates things to a greater level. That's not a bad thing to do. What we're really addressing, what we're really trying to drive home, is if you prevent another player from engaging in the game by use of a power, that's a really fucked up thing to do to them, and it's an irresponsible decision. A lot of people do that without thinking about what they're actually doing, but if you're watching this video now, you don't have that excuse anymore. Be a responsible gamer.
I have done that before. I'm sure that most role players have done that. Most people do it as a
mistake, and I don't think most people do it with the intent to ruin another player's experience, but it does.
We are all called to, once you become a LARPer, and you become aware of the things that drive people out of LARPing, you have a responsibility to think about how you can play the game in a way that makes the game better for everyone. And this is one power that demands you think carefully before using it.
So yeah, soapbox.
Alright, that was Scalpel Tongue. Shannon, would you like to say anything else before we move on?
No.
Okay.
Just when we talk about powers having a really deep effect and impact on things, that's the sort of thing we're referring to.
Sloughing the serpent's skin. Sloughing. Sloughing. There's no F. Sloughing the serpent's skin. One of
mine.
Shannon's.
Yes. So, sloughing the serpent's skin, other than just being horrendous to say. So
this power, BNS doesn't care about people with lists. I'm sorry, that was really mean, but it's a hard fucking power to say.
So, in this...
Hey, say it 10 times fast.
Shannon, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So, this power, you spend 10 standard actions to wriggle out of your skin. The resulting mass, that's what they call it. The resulting mass, that's what they call the skin you have wiggled out of. Can be...
Just let me die.
No, we need your skin.
Just
talk. Can be worn by another individual, conferring one of two benefits, depending on what form you are in when you remove your skin. The first one is if you are in your serpent form, you give the person who's wearing your skin the benefits of Skin of the Adder, including the bonus from Charisma.
if they have it.
If they have it. If either you or the person wearing the skin has it, they get the Charisma bonus. While they're wearing your skin, they appear lithe and serpentine, as if they had activated the power themselves. Also, they can activate Skin of the Adder, but that is a waste of their action and blood.
On the skin.
And and your time.
The skin! You're not thinking about the skin, you bitch!
I think you just want to be a vet for the skins.
I won't deny the skins are an
The skins are a
important.
significant part of it, yes.
Okay. If you're in your humanoid form, when you shed your skin,
It really bothers me that it's humanoid.
I mean, you're a snake.
Even so.
Okay. Shannon, finish this nightmare.
Whoever puts on the skin will look like you, as a perfect physical copy of you, including height, weight, and your presenting gender.
Hey, it's your one chance to be tall.
Shut the fuck up. It lasts until the next sunset, on which the skin is unwearable.
So carefully, very carefully, Adam, wearing their skin does not give them the charisma focus. It gives them the benefit of the charisma focus for the skin of the outer discipline, Serpentis 3, that they have gotten from the skin. Later on, in the discipline, it calls out you do not get any of the social focuses from wearing the skin.
One of the highest focused benefits in the game.
Yeah. Another thing is this is a major transformative power. If you try and go horde form or turn into a wolf or something along those lines, the skin tears or is destroyed somehow. This power really kind of skeeves me out a little bit, as I think it does everybody. But I think a big thing with this that I keep thinking of is we already have one power, which was a merit that we covered last time, that is snakes shedding their skin. Now we have another one. So you could be in a situation in which you are like, does this skin do anything? Or is this a waste of skin? Do I need to throw it out, or should I put it on? So, label your skins, people.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
Because I got some stuff to say.
Yeah, this is one of 3 disciplines that makes me uncomfortable. Techniques. The others will come up. Real quick, Adam pointed out, wearing this should cause you to lose the appearance focus. And to that, I will just point out, a focus is how you approach a given challenge. It does not mean you are good at it. You can have the appearance focus with fucked up skin and walk up to someone and say, hey. And they'll run away.
Or think you have a really bad sunburn.
Yeah, that's you relying upon your appearance to get the job done. People very often misunderstand and think that appearance focus means pretty. Appearance focus means when someone sees you, they remember.
I would remember someone wearing someone else's skin.
That's very focusing on your appearance.
So we've got 2 effects. The first effect is you can pass as me. That's useful. Especially as a Sedite, I like having body doubles. It does
the most infiltrating clan in history.
It does not beat supernatural methods. Explicitly, it doesn't change your aura, but also it just doesn't have the generic line of beating supernatural methods. So you will be tested, and you'll be whatever clan you truly are. Anything you can think of for verification, this doesn't pass it, except direct physical appearance.
Stone of the True Form?
This is a transformative power, so it would probably just, rip the skin.
Okay.
Or, ST discretion at that point. The one that is big is, this is the only mechanic that I can think of that gives away disciplines to people. You don't lose the discipline yourself. You can just hand one of the best transformative powers in the game, the dodge transformative power in the game, to another person. At first, I felt like that was too much. And I still feel like that's a lot. But the fact that they placed some pretty good limits on it. You can only use this once a night, and the skin, I remember the skin only lasting a single night. Like, it became unusable.
Where's the paragraph right at the top? At the next sunset after you shed it.
No,
Down?
There. Right there, where your mouse just was.
At
the next sunset after you shed it, the skin desiccates and becomes unwearable.
Humanoid.
So yes.
Sorry,
yes,
Grandpa's having trouble with Skype.
I don't. What's the magic box? Okay. But yeah. So the fact that they put in these inherent limitations to you can't hand it out to everyone in your group. You're empowering one person a night with this thing. That's still a lot. Still might be too much. But in general, I do like empowering support things. And as some people are alluding to, I like anything that jumpstarts the boon economy. And the fact that one of the major obstacles to the boon economy is the fact that outside of I work for you for a night and help you kill a man, there are not a ton of things that you can give people that they will benefit from. I will make sure that people get this, because I'm seeing a couple of comments. You do have to pick between they look like you or they get your discipline. Both of those are useful. Both of those are cool. You do have to pick which one. Sure, you have some opinions.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah.
The other
Mop
thing,
it up.
Now.
The other one that I think, what my actual real opinion on this is that this is such a fascinating power, not for Setites. In particular, this power synchronizes beautifully with the Asimite build that hands out the Unbreakable Sword. It makes you basically Sancho. It makes you the greatest squire of all time. You go into battle and you're like, okay, boss, here's 24 XP. No, more than 24 XP, I'm sorry. No, 24 XP, yeah. Here's 24 XP and a sword that lets you do 5 crit 7. Just the regular blood boon. Let's keep rolling. It's such a great buff build, and there weren't a lot of those in this game before. This works so well with that concept that we talked about before about the Asamites being proper assassins. This builds into their burst. This builds into their overall efficacy. It gives them more XP to play with. It's so good for that. It's such a great... Basically, the way that the Web of Knives should be trained is in 2 Asamite teams, one of which buffs the other one and then just acts as an Auspex spotter. It's the perfect hit.
Especially with the fact that Masquerade has always been demanding support builds. You can get dynamics where you expect the Elder to buff their Ancilla neonate kids, acting as the patron. You can get instances where you expect the Ancilla and the neonates to buff their elders, the neonates and the Ancilla empowering the one person that they all follow. Both of those are possible depending on what kind of dynamic you're working in. But in general, Masquerade didn't have many options for support. They had options for lieutenants who went off and did their own things.
Yeah.
Or, it also works... I mean, it works
yes,
well with
DJ,
every
you
set.
still have your skin of the adder after you shed your skin.
Yeah. The paragraph about it being a major transformative is a little bit weird trying to read it, but I would say it's about 75 to 25 that the reading is you are not precluded from transforming yourself. But there is a not unreasonable argument for that. So it's a little ambiguous, which is always really upsetting about a rule, but it's not world-changing.
I think that we will come to a consensus after sitting down and really reading the language carefully. Which, I mean, like, I do think that this line settles it. Should the wearer assume a form, the skin tears irreparably. I think wearing the skin is a major transformative power. Giving up the skin, you are empowering whoever's wearing it, but nothing else about you is changing. You should be able to use Serpentis 3 on your own after shedding your skin.
Point is that, yes, there is ambiguity here. There is a good argument for the other side that I'm sure at least a couple of you in the comments are wanting to make. I do see it. I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion, but I get it. Point is, really, really, really good buff power. Because if I'm using that power on someone, I'm not actually even intending to go into combat. I'm going to have Obfuscate or Auspex, and I'm going to give you those buffs. You go into combat, and then I Auspex in and start dropping shit on people. If I'm playing the wonkiest, I'm an Assamite Sorcerer, and I go in there and Auspex and throw fireballs around. The point is, really, really easy to use this power to great effect as an assistant, as a squire, in a game that really needs buff builds, and I love it. It's great.
Okay, that was Sloughing the Serpent's Skin. Smiling Through the Pain. Both dope name and a little bit relevant for us, but also the most Malkavian power ever written. Ever. Demontation 1, Fortitude 1, Presence 3. I get why Presence is the highest rated, but that's bullshit. This should be like, buying this gives you Demontation 7, because I love it so much. Once a turn, when you are the target of a physical attack, you may respond instead of going ahead and throwing a chop and resisting and trying to fight it. You relent to the test and laugh maniacally.
It's mechanically required that you laugh maniacally.
That should be where the power ends.
That's not
because, frankly, when Joe swings at me and I respond by laughing maniacally and taking the hit, he's gonna run away.
I don't care if there's 10 of my team against 1 of him. If I roll in with my 7-hit Bruja and I go to punch him, he goes, I relent. Ha 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 ha! I am fair escaping that action. Fuck my punch. I withdraw the action. I'd like to leave. Can we pretend this didn't happen? No, thank you.
Yeah, Alex, as per the previous power, explicitly, people can wear the skin in sunlight, and it works. So, yeah. But yeah, so, getting on to the actual effect of Smile Through
the Pain.
It goes on! Which, again, doesn't need to. If you do, and remain able to act, which is an important caveat, because remember, if you relent and they outbid you, that was an exceptional success.
Or if they're a Bruja.
Well, yeah, you're right. You may immediately target your attacker without action cost with either Dread Gaze or Entrancement.
Dread Gaze.
Yes. You do still have to pay the blood cost, and you can't modify the power with additional powers or effects. That's mostly referring to, I don't know, Dread Gaze gets modified by a Mortal Gaze in this book, and there are a couple other things. Anyway, yeah, so again, if you swing at me and I laugh maniacally, yes, you're gonna run away, whether it's mechanical or just you noticed what just happened. I'm almost more concerned if I feel like entrancement should auto-fail. I swing at you swing at me, I giggle, you hit me, and then decide, oh hey, we're buds now. No, as a Malkavian, I'm gonna go, man, is everything okay at home?
But I respect that you can take a punch. What? Yeah.
All in all, though, like, this is a really fun power. I still don't think it's good. This is great as an NPC. It's free, no action cost for dread gaze or entrancement is not worth what you incur for relenting to a physical challenge. It's cool. It's fun. It's fucking hilarious if you have practiced your creepy giggle. Probably not worth it, though, in my
I don't know
opinion.
which of us you're pointing at, Joe.
Me neither.
Joe, something you have something to say? Shannon?
It makes me want to play Malkavian, honestly. I
That-
want to see how
yeah.
many people I can freak out with that.
This is one of the powers. Like, there are some techniques that you buy to supplement a build. There are some techniques that you construct a build around. And for the record, it's not a cheap power for a social build. If you're a Malkavian, you're buying presents out of clan and
Unless
buying a
you're
bit of
an
fortitude.
Ananke.
If you're an Ananke, sure, and they got some cool merit, so those are a little more valid. This is mostly for a Toreador who bought Demontation out of clan. But yeah, like, this is if you build around this technique, and that makes sense because, like, a Malkavian whose entire gimmick is a laugh that makes people uncomfortable is easily top 5 Malk concepts I've ever heard. I feel like I played that accidentally last Cron.
No, wait, that was simple.
But yeah, my opinion holds. Joe?
I think it's better than you do. I think Dread Gaze is... What makes this power good is that it is a decision whether or not to let it go off. So most of the time, you won't have this power go. But a lot of jumps, a lot of boxes are designed or planned in such a way that a single person being forced to extricate themselves from that box probably means you can get away. When I go to do a box, one of the main things I have to consider is, how am I going to spend our actions? How do I be efficient about this? How do I avoid notice? How do I build my team in such a way that it does the job exactly as it needs to be done? And almost always, it's a 4-person team. It's 2 physicals, a mental, and a social. And that's it. That's all you bring to your hit. And if you can manage to take out one of those physicals, or fucking both of them, that's a huge deal. You've gone from probably almost certainly dead to pretty easy to get away, and it's with a fairly low demontation cost. It's sort of a poor man's sophistry. I think that's really, really good. In a one-on-one fight, it's also really good just because Dread Gaze is awesome. You could stack this with the build that uses Relentless Pursuit and the Sabbat Merit Executioner that lets you hit people as they move out of your space. So somebody hits you in the chest, you drop Dread Gaze on them, and then you just auto-beat them to death in a way that they can't respond to. There are good builds that use this for real mechanical effect, but it's not good all the time for all people.
I'll go ahead and concede now. A couple of people have pointed out there's a wide range of clans that put Fortitude and Presence together, and buying Demontation 1 is not a stretch by any imagination. So, yeah, and absolutely I will not concede action economy is a big deal, and throwing off social offensive test for no cost is big. Especially if you're outnumbered, usually you're fucked. And this is one of the rare cases where you're doubling the number of social tests you're able to throw per turn. That's fair. All right, that was Smile Through the Pain.
Best.
Okay,
Discipline.
we have come to the part of the night you have all been waiting for.
The
And by-
only reason to make this video.
And by you all, I mean us, because fuck you motherfuckers.
The man,
The myth, the legend,
The
Stealth Car! Oh, it's Stealth Vehicle.
No,
It's
is
Stealth
fucking
Car.
Stealth Car. It is the greatest power, the most bonkers, ape shit, balls to the wall. Why did you write this? This is the best thing
The
ever written.
stupidest thing ever put in any Masquerade book. Yes, you can quote me on that I will buy 7 times per PC. I will take merits to put it on a 6th gen. Stealth car!
This power is
Okay.
awesome.
Oh.
So, real quick,
I'm
just
gonna
so you're
moderate.
aware, real quick note. Mechanically, it sucks.
Oh yeah.
So,
It's not a power.
Super dumb.
so that we don't talk over each other, Joe, summarize the mechanics, and then we will go one at a time, just individually. Let's
Do it
react to
after.
the beauty before us.
Yeah. So mechanically what this does is it allows you to effectively apply a toned down version of Mask of 1000 Faces to the vehicle you are driving. That's the first effect. This is one of those things that has multiple sub-effects. We'll dig into the rest of them. So the first thing here, the ability to subtly change the appearance of your car. You cannot dramatically change the appearance of your car. You can't make a stock car into a van, things like that. But you can change the color of your vehicle, you can change the headlights, you can change the license plate, you can change the tinting on the windows. You can do a lot of effects like that that subtly but by degrees make it unrecognizable. So if you're in a situation where you need to change your car in the same way that in the Grand Theft Auto games where you like pull into a car wash and it paints your car and now you're safe from the cops who followed you into the car wash, same sort of general vibe to that power. The second half of this power is that it attunes you to the vehicle you're driving. Which means that if you don't have the focus in drive, because in drive you have to have a focus for each type of vehicle you drive.
Spec.
Whatever. The point is that if you don't have the appropriate spec, this gives you that spec. You just learn to drive it. Or, if you already have that spec, it grants you a +5 to your drive check. Now, I will tell you, I once caused a player, as a storyteller, I once said to a player, I need a physicals drive. And the entire game came to a halt, and everyone turned and said, huh? And I was like, yeah, physicals drive. And they're like, a drive check? I was like, yeah. And they're like, you do that with physicals? And I was like, maybe.
Can you tell me for sure you don't?
I thought, what? Point is, this makes you better at a pool you'll never make. And gives you the ability to drive everything. That's the mechanical thing that it does. Now I'm going to take the first turn loving this power. Obviously, you've got the clown car. You can change the colors, make it tie-dye, make it really silly, make it ridiculous, make it blah, 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 blah. You can change the license plate while you're being followed by the cops and give them aneurysms. You can make your car flash bright neon blue and then suddenly turn camouflage. You can do amazing, glorious things, to say nothing of tinting the windows of your car while making eye contact with someone in this crazy power move. All of those are amazing. But it's not just cars. You just sneak onto a military base, which is fucking trivial. Get in a jet and just go, hey.
Now it's a biplane.
I know how to drive a jet. And it's pink. And you just fly that bitch off the base. That's a really big deal. You just left with a jet. The other one, and somebody mentioned a submarine, and I'm glad you mentioned that because the first example I thought of when I read this power was you just get on an aircraft carrier, you sail it away, you're like, yeah, this bitch is leopard print now. And no one can do shit because aircraft carriers can kill the average country in war. And you just have one now. I love this power. They didn't ask me to, but I'll give them my firstborn. This power is incredible. I love this power more than I love my own flesh and blood. It's incredible. I love it.
Yes, we are drinking tonight. Feel free to join. Here's a quick. This is the best physical representation we have of stealth car.
I love it. And the turn is up.
Oh god.
This is so fucking dumb. In the chat right now, we probably have at least a collective 40 years of experience playing Vampire the Masquerade. I would be surprised if we polled every person watching us right now and more than 3 of them had ever had to make a drive check. What niche did you think you were filling? Who was the lone writer sitting in the room saying, you know what we need to do? We need to make Knight Rider a cool concept. What?
They objectively shouldn't have done it, and I am incredibly, and I need it to be understood, I am not being sarcastic.
This is not...
I love this power. It's amazing.
My dream, if no storyteller does this, I've spent the last 5 years storytelling, and so I'm done for a long time. But when I'm the storyteller next, I'm gonna find an excuse. Vampire the Requiem doesn't count. That's not real life.
It's like Canada.
I
If you
will
die in Canada,
run
you're
a
fucked.
plot where the Nosferatu Justicar arrives. And he will arrive in a motorcade surrounded by 7 cars. And as he comes into view, all 7 of them will activate stealth car and flash with the words Justicar Bob on the front dash. And then flash back to normal. Because this is just the greatest, most absurd, most beautifully useless, but I will find a way to buy it on my 5th gen power that has ever been written, ever. And yeah, the fact that it also just explicitly allows subterfuge, streetwise, to apply to you anywhere, not just in the city. Not only can you walk into a military jet, hop in it, and fly away, but as soon as you do, the military goes, fuck, where did our jet go?
Streetwise prevents all non-supernatural methods. That's a $13 billion piece of machinery, and you just left with it. And they can't do a fucking thing.
The dumbest thing in the universe, and I want 12.
And the best part is that you stealth car this son of a bitch, and now you look like you're flying some FedEx plane around, and they're like, oh, you just bought a big plane and you got a license to fly it. And you're shooting people with goddamn missiles.
And they're shaped like packages or something.
Oh my god. Okay.
So, what can I say that hasn't already been said?
The same thing but more.
I know. So, the funniest thing... No, it's not. But one of the funny things about this power is the fucking name. Stealth Vehicle.
Stealth car, motherfucker.
No, for the purpose of stealth vehicle. That sounds like something that would be on the side of a generic brand.
You bought this technique at Walmart.
Not even you got
Costco.
Yeah. It came in like a pack of 40, you got a good deal on it. So you bought a whole bunch of stealth vehicle and not, Knight Rider, which is the brand name. So I just love how fucking stupid that name is. And that it isn't like seriously, they could have called it like Knight Rider or something like that. Just changed it enough so it's not copyrighted.
But they had integrity.
So I want to make 2 other final points before I move on from this power. One of them, if you didn't interact with him, one of maybe the single best Requiem character ever played was played by Rob Paul, and his name was Valentine Gold. He was the Harpy of Washington, D.C. He was a member of the Ordo Dracul. He was exactly as good as it was possible for a Deva to be at combat.
Which was the best.
And he was a nightmare. He wore a bright gold sequin vest, talking a ridiculous accent that he just randomly quit using.
Whenever he wanted.
Whatever country it needed to be at the time.
And legit, was like the most politically powerful figure in the world. He flew half of his covenant to California to beat a man into changing his name.
Because his name was bad.
Because they had the same name. He oppressed a half of the country over his name. And he went there out of goddamn character. What? Harpy Gold was the best character ever played in Requiem. And this power is the power he would have had out of this book. He would have lived in this power. He would have eaten it for breakfast. He would have used it to season his meals. It would be all he thought about from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to bed. This is the Valentine Gold of techniques. Second thing.
Serious face.
We played a game run by a good friend of ours named Darren, a spectacular DM, brilliant storyteller, who did something that we really thought was impossible, which is ran what was a Pathfinder game without ever having us roll dice. There were no mechanics. Every scene was narrative. It was constructed as a group. It was based on our character ideals and the ways we talked and the ways we behaved with one another. It was this brilliantly written game that we played in for most of a year.
It took us 2 months to notice.
To realize we weren't rolling dice. And that was a huge deal. It was proof that it is possible to tell a story so good that mechanics don't have to enter into it. Now, I will point out, almost no one is that good. If you're wondering, you're not. Darren is. That's the list. I was listing the people who are. Point is, it was a really great argument for the importance of roleplay for a group that really does focus on mechanics a lot. And this power is the same thing. And that's why I say that I unironically love it. Because this power is so hilarious and so much fun and so inspiring that it sucks mechanically. It is not a mechanically useful power. But you want to build a concept around it because it's so much fun and so defining. And that's such an amazing piece of writing, which is why we mocked this power for like 30 minutes. And I still say, without reservation, I love it, and I think it's my favorite power in this book. It's just such a great example of brilliant writing.
There's an interesting conversation going on right now about exactly how wide does the drive skill apply. This is going to be one of the cases where storyteller discretion matters more than anything that anyone says. Storyteller discretion is still very much alive in the BNS system. It's just that they have to know where that discretion does apply and where the mechanics have spoken clearly. I would make the argument that the computer skill is what would be used to pilot drones, and a reasonable argument could be made for science engineering.
I would say unambiguously it's computer.
Yeah. But certainly there is going to be a range of objects where a reasonable argument could be made for the drive skill. And so stealth car is versatile.
It does
it's
a lot,
just not good.
It does a lot of things. Individually, none of those things are good things to do. And again, for all of that, this is the best power, and I want 10 of them.
Okay.
Does it work on horses?
Horses are animal ken. That's actually explicit in the book.
Horses are animal ken. Okay. Next. Okay. Back to serious mode.
You need to understand, we literally, that was all we were talking about in the lead up.
We spent 3 hours on stealth car.
Yes.
Okay. Serious face. One of Shannon's powers, Stony Retribution.
Alright, Stony Retribution.
Which should have been Rocky Revenge. Like, a rare swing and a miss on naming BNS.
Alright, so, whenever you incur damage...
Stealth vehicle plus Giovanni horse merit.
I am going to start breaking kneecaps if y'all don't settle the fuck down in the comments. Right goddamn now.
Alright,
Nick Kelly wins the chat. Okay, Shannon.
Okay, Stony Stony Retribution. When you incur damage during when you use Assist Defender, you may immediately activate this power without spending an action to do so. You must take at least 1 point of damage that is not reduced by your Fortitude powers. While Stony Retribution is active, next time you succeed in an opposed challenge while making an attack against an individual who injured you, that attack is automatically converted to an exceptional success. So, usually, I would say, don't take damage to do a thing. Especially just an exceptional on an attack. There are many other ways to do exceptional on attack. However, looking over it again now, I see it's much more for... It really is gargoyle focused. And gargoyles are never going to have good physical traits. So they are very rarely, if ever, going...
To attack.
To attack. To dodge, fucking hell, they're crazy.
They are Dodge Jesus' older brother, Dodge Jim, who used to bully Dodge Jesus.
Yeah. But to attack, they're never going to have the dots for it. They're never going to have the numbers for it. This gives them what they're doing already a benefit to it. They're already taking damage and, soaking it up. So now they actually will do, and they get potence in clan, so they can do 3 crit 5 or 4 crit 6 easily. So they can be doing massive amounts of damage when they pull this off. It'll be 3 crit 5 unless they have something else. Or, yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a big thing. First looking at it, I didn't think it was that great, but I think it is a lot better than I was giving it credit for.
Yeah, so first I'm going to respond to an interesting point that Josh Sonner raised that I did not think of. Yeah,
we have Saunders in the chat?
Yeah.
Dope.
This definitely works with Vengeance of Samael. The specific language of Vengeance is that it can be enhanced by disciplines, but cannot be applied to a ranged attack. And the language, Vengeance of Samael is still a challenge. So when Stony Retribution is active, the next time you succeed in an opposed challenge, in other words, get a normal success while making an attack against the individual who injured you, that attack is automatically converted to an exceptional success. So this is a way of enhancing Vengeance of Samael without the perception focus. That said, you're talking about Visceratica up to 2 plus Valerian up to 5, but you're not taking perception on Valerian. But this is really cool. This is a mechanically useful but flavor boosting power. What I'm glad about is that this is a power that depends on you taking damage, but is not insisting, like some other mechanics in this book, that you relent. This can be activated by you if you take damage while assist defending. Don't take damage while assist defending? Dope! You're a great assist defender. Do take damage while assist defending? Hey! You're a gargoyle and you're not supposed to take damage. That's probably a dude that you should go kill. And now it turns out you're better at going and killing him. It does not have blood cost to activate. You just decide to activate it and pick your target. So this is a really cool power that very much boosts your intended role as an assist defender as a gargoyle. So I love this. There's also the interesting note that you can activate this power if you take damage on your own while you have Bulwark activated, which is the Visceratica Elder power where you have you've hugged someone and you're protecting them, and so you taking damage is you shielding someone else. If you're an 8th gen, don't take Bulwark.
So-
Maybe if you're but probably. Anyway, really good power on 9th gen assist defending Gargoyle. Joe?
So this is actually a power that's really interesting because there's one of the reasons why I like lower to mid XP Chronicles is because there are builds that only exist at those levels. One of the challenges of Masquerade, one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the healers, is that there is a relatively low ceiling on tank. And tank is a key archetype in combat. And in Masquerade, there's kind of a cap. It's basically, if you're an Elder, you have all of Fortitude, including the ablative damage, and you have a good dodge. And that's really all you're doing to tank. If you're in Sabbat, you carry around Battle Scarred. What this power does really well, and what a low XP game does really, really well, is create a role for someone who only assists defense, whose whole job is not to deal attacks, but to soak up attacks. Because what happens a lot in combat at low XP is people will prioritize hitting often or hitting for a lot. And people who prioritize hitting often will get completely negated by an effective defensive build. And so there's a lot that goes into it. It's a really great concept that goes away when you hit about 400 XP. So what's cool about this is this synergizes, as Jacob mentioned, a 9th gen AD build, but an 8th gen pure tank that has the Fortitude power for ablative damage, personal armor. And what this is stacked ablative damage. You do the immediate ablative damage of personal armor, then you follow that up with, whenever you actually score your very unlikely to score attack, you hit them like a Mack truck. So this is a great augmentation to a build that I really like, and I'm glad, this is kind of an obscure way to do it, but I'm glad that build got attention.
And remember, Gargoyles have potency in Clan.
Yep.
Gargoyles hit for high damage, they just don't hit with many traits. And so being able to give them exceptional successes, that is a noticeable buff.
Yeah. This is just a super cool power.
Yeah. And it is a setting and flavor enhancing power. This is making Gargoyles do what they wanted to do the entire time, but maybe weren't able to succeed at. Okay, anything else we want to say about that?
No.
All right, next we have one of Joe's picks, which is Symbiotic Possession.
Oh, I love this power.
Daimonian and Dominate.
So, it's possible that I have at times, both in private and public, and to various gaming publications and networks and conventions, may have suggested that infernalism is bad.
A couple of times into your pillow.
Yeah, infernalism is bad. And there are a lot of reasons why. And that's very frustrating for me because if you don't know who I am, I enjoy the book Paradise Lost. It's a thing. I enjoy it in the way that, like, a heroin addict enjoys heroin.
Kind of
A
wanted
lot.
you to say Paradise Lost.
Point is, love the book. And so I really, really want infernalism to be good. I want it to be cool. I want it to be a viable concept that can stand up on its own. But because of the nature of this game, which, by the way, this isn't a criticism of the nature of the game, everyone views infernalism as a kill on sight. Now, there are philosophical arguments to be made for pretty much all of the sects that infernalism is kind of like diablerie. It's the worst, most evil thing you can do, and a lot of people kind of dabble in it. But because of the social nature of the game, very, very few people really get to do infernalism because mechanically it's not viable. And the reasons it's not viable, the main reason it's not viable is that it's too detectable for the benefit it provides. The things that are useful are very, very identifiable as infernal powers, which means that it's a kill on sight power. So that means it needs to be so much better. If every time you use Tyrant's Gaze, everyone would be triggered to murder you, then Tyrant's Gaze better strip away your memory of being a vampire. That's what's happening here. That's the level that we're working on. And so that's what's really, really frustrating about infernalism, which is why I love this power. What this power does is you...
Fuck.
Oh, that...
Fuck.
No,
those.
we're still here. We're still here. Yep.
Good.
Can't-
Okay.
yeah. Ooh,
Hit the
Jacob
wrong
almost
button.
canceled the video.
Hit the wrong button.
What you can do is you spend a point of blood at 5 standard actions and summon a minor demon and bind it to your will. For the rest of the game, it gives you the ability to use powers 1 through 5 of Daimonian in Everyman. But it uses it for you. It spends the action. It has the Infernal Taint show up in its aura. It has all of the negative effects that make Infernalism useless. It takes them away. It's camouflage for Infernalism. And what's even better is that the drawback that it comes with, because it's a great power, the drawback that it comes with is a derangement that forces you to roleplay more of its role.
Real quick,
Yeah,
go ahead and summarize the power for our guests.
I did. 1 blood, 5 standard action, summon a demon, bind it to your will during the Everyman round on your initiative.
I might have given myself a panic attack and wiped my memory.
You can use, it uses Daimonian for you. And it comes in and gives you an obsession for one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, setting aside the fact that, the game still has a very Judeo-Christian bent, and there are arguments on whether or not that's good, I'm not saying it's definitely bad, but it's also not definitely good. That being said, one of the 7 deadly sins, you get an obsession with it. I love that. That particular mechanic is so cool to me. The drawback of this power is that your character behaves noticeably badly. So it makes you less detectable in the immediate, I know you're the bad guy, but it gives you more chances to fuck up, which is what subterfuge is all about. That's what the drama of infiltration is and should be. Not someone's going to be able to use a power and everything comes crashing the fuck down like a house of cards. It's every step you take is on a knife's edge, and you have to keep yourself constantly in check. And this power embodies all of that. This power single-handedly makes Infernalism a good concept again. For 12 fucking XP! That's amazing!
Go ahead and also talk about your problems with this while we've got you.
Oh, I have one key problem. When people use Auspice to telepathy you, they have the ability to ask the question, is there more than one consciousness in the body, if they succeed on the chop and get the questions. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing for them to be able to do. It means that if you're dealing with someone that you're pretty sure is going to be telepathying you, probably a good idea to use a simple action and dismiss some bitches. But my problem with that is that it adds that Auspice question in this power. And that's one of my main issues a couple of times in this book. When you introduce a mechanic, it should be easily identifiable in all of the places that it's relevant. This should be in an addendum or something at the top of the book about Auspex. Hey, there's a new Auspex question. Because that's really important. Because this is a question that you're only going to ask this kind of question if you're already pretty much positive the person is an infernalist. So it needs to be something you know about and can reference easily. So I love the power, but that is a very frustrating detail.
Yeah. Shen, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I don't really have any thoughts on this. I don't think about infernalism too much. So, yeah, it's just one of the parts of the game I don't really focus on.
So, we only flagged this one. But there are a couple of techniques based on Daimonian in this book that boost infernalism. This one makes it easier to use Daimonian. Someone asked the obvious, I should say obviously, probably the best use is spamming Daimonian 5, because that is inarguably the strongest debuff in the game.
It's so good.
TI is a really good debuff. On certain specific builds, it might be better. If you're hitting a gun build and you're giving them a -5 to offensive tests and taking away their wits focus, that hurts. But Daimonian 5 is generally speaking the strongest debuff in the game. Throwing that twice is horrifying. But then there are other techniques here that let you use infernal things and not have them be obviously infernal. throw a fireball that isn't green fire. So hey, I'm a thaumaturge. It's beautiful. I mean, hell, even fucking I resurrect in normal fire. Well, hey, Samedi can do that now. Well, don't Samedi resurrect in their haven? This is my haven!
Or Elysium.
Welcome.
Yeah, they can also
guys.
resurrect in Elysium.
Yeah.
Point is,
so the Infernalists did not have options. They were limited to either one of 3 powers or the Disciplined Daimonian, and as soon as they used one of their cool tricks, they were fucked. And so they had to pick where they used their cool trick carefully, or they just didn't use any of their special toys and were generally mustache-twirling evil people. And that's fun, but you want to get something out of that. And giving flexible options to being the bad guy is what Masquerade is all about. Okay, next we have one of Shannon's and what I know is going to be popular in this crowd, which is the terror of tentacles.
Tentacles.
I thought that was the... okay, real quick, comment from Adam. You have to loudly curse your target. Are you telling me you don't scream "fuck you" every time you use a mental power?
Also, the demon is using that for you in your belly.
That too.
So your stomach is growling.
If you put your ear up against my stomach, you vaguely hear, "Lucifer damn you to hell."
Even if your SC is as ridiculous as these two idiots, it's still easy to negate that potential problem.
But anyway,
Yes.
terror of tentacles, which makes me feel touched in my bad places.
Tentacles.
Alright, so Terror of Tentacles is a power in which you have your arms of the abyss out and they're being tentacle-y shit. And you spend a point of blood and use a simple action and you add 1 weapon quality
From a specific list.
from a specific list to one of your tentacles. And you can do it up to 3
Per tentacle.
per tentacle. And I think, what is it? Like
However much
5,
blood you want to
yeah.
spend for the number of tentacles you've made.
Yeah, I think you can make up to 5 tentacles?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So, you could conceivably spend 15 blood and 15 actions buffing your tentacles.
So,
Or you could do something good.
Because here's the problem.
let's let Shannon finish.
So-
Shannon, how do you feel about this power?
I dislike it. I think it is a waste of time and blood and actions. Even if you do it beforehand, you're still using so much goddamn blood that no one who has this technique would feasibly be able to do it. To give all 5 of their tentacles like the 3 weapon quality. You have no blood. Also, while you're making your tentacles shinier or something, they're just punching you to death, and then you're dead. So, one of the things on the list is you can give one of your tentacles quick draw. I don't understand that because you already have the tentacle out. It's already there. So what do you quick draw? It's already that you have
That's
to
an
have it
interesting question. Like, maybe it can draw a weapon?
Actually, Bill just made a note that if you reread the beginning very carefully, transform 1 or more of your arms of the abyss into vicious weapons.
out. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
And transform 1 or more of your arms. Okay.
So if you spend 1 blood and simple action, all of your arms take on a... Okay, hang on. We didn't read carefully. This
So,
power is
possibly
less ridiculously
You spend
expensive.
1 blood and a simple action, and all 5 of your tentacles gain X
A weapon
quality. Or if you want, you can give each of them a different 3 quality. Okay, yeah. So it's not... a very careful reading. You're probably right. You can spend a certain amount of blood and a certain amount of actions. The cheapest being you spend 3 blood and 3 actions to give 5 tentacles the same 3 qualities, which probably, I mean, even just to make the bookkeeping easy, that's what you want to do, because you don't want to keep track of the 5 different tentacles with 5 unique combinations.
So this power is less ridiculously bad.
I still don't get the quick draw thing.
It's still not good.
For one thing, you don't. Your tentacles are still like going on like an 8 for their.
Well,
for
11
their
if you've got fast.
Oh.
So you can't. Oh, sorry.
And then
Go ahead and
what
finish,
their
Shannon.
traits are. Their traits are still ridiculously. It's just your physical augmented by potent.
It's a specific pool, actually.
Okay, but it's still always ridiculously low and doesn't get.
They will
higher
get
than-
accurate,
You
but
can
yeah.
get but still,
Yeah.
that's not gonna get it significantly
Mhm.
high.
Yeah.
So things like what is it? Is it brutal or deadly that you win if you?
Take the last test.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah. So brutal isn't going to help really.
Unless you're over.
Unless you're overbidding, in which case just smack them with like a limp fish. Like, why?
They gonna die.
Also, if you have potence, which if you're a Lasombra with this power, you already have armor piercing because you have potence, and potence augments this. So that doesn't count. Quick draw doesn't really do anything.
Okay, so Facebook is going to cut us off automatically in 5 minutes.
Oh shit.
So we're going to...
How many do we have?
You know what? We're gonna stop the video now and start it up again.
Let's just wrap up.
We do not have enough time. There are
we
4
don't need
left.
to do the
And
rest of them. We can just wrap up. We just talked for 4 hours.
what do we have left?
The other ones we wanted to talk about were that damn cat, which makes you follow an animal.
You're right.
Translocation, which lets you teleport with celerity. That's a bad thing. And Vanishing Act, which you obfuscate while people are distracted.
Okay,
you can
yeah.
already do that.
Yeah, that's already
It's
a
a
thing.
mechanic of obfuscate.
Also, you don't need to use kind of just like throw a rock and say, "Hey, look over there." That's
Bullseye is better for obfuscate.
Okay, so yeah, let's finish up Tentacles of Terror, and if we have time, give short closing statements. Joe, you have things to say about this?
Not really. We talked about it.
Okay. My thing is, there's some cool things here. You can transform your tentacles into weird shapes, like chess pieces or statues, which, why would you, but cool. And you can make your tentacles move, which means they can be useless somewhere else. We talked about how Obten got some love in these techniques, and it did. The tentacles aren't one of them. The tentacles are fun. The tentacle power is use adjacent, is what I would say. It can have use, and giving it weapon qualities is nice, but it's not worth it.
Yeah, so very, very quickly on those notes, there are ways to use this power effectively. There are tricks you can do with it. The thing is that those tricks aren't really worth the squeeze. It's actions, it's blood, it's time, it's blood. All of that being said, this is the second example of what I talked about with Stealth Car. I love this power because it's super cool. It's super thematic. It makes your tentacles not good, but at least it makes them an actual factor. You don't feel like a douchebag for wasting physical slots. It's
Okay.
not a good power.
3 minutes left. Hard cutoff of 1 minute, because otherwise Facebook just cuts us off.
Yep.
Joe, what are your final thoughts?
I get the 40-second one. Final thoughts. Basically, again, like I said at the end of the night last time, I really, really like this book. That said, there are some pretty glaring problems that I would really, really like to see addressed when this book is done being a beta. The biggest one is the one we were talking about with the attacker slots. That is honestly destructive to the nature of the game. And I really think that if it's not fixed in the book, any reasonable storyteller has no real choice but to exclude it from the game. That's the biggest flaw in this book. There's some other things that I mentioned along the way. There are details I don't like or problems that I think could be corrected. That's the one real big problem. Otherwise, I love it. Great book. Awesome powers we talked about today. Viva la Stealth Car.
So we skipped a lot of techniques here because obviously we had a lot to say about all of them. If we skipped a technique you were interested in, probably we thought it was boring and didn't have anything to say about it. But if you want to leave a comment, we're maybe going to do more of these in the future.
Starting to look that way.
Leave a comment if you're interested in us talking about one.
Or anything, really.
Overall, these techniques gave some much needed love to some disciplines that were always good but not quite worth their costs. And I love that. And there are some genuinely bad things in here that I think can, if not be fixed, then be lived with. Shannon, you have exactly 1 minute to speak.
Okay, so big thing, stealth car should have been called Knight Rider. They got away
The
with
stealth car.
They got away with that damn cat, which is a Disney movie with that darn cat.
Wait, really?
That darn cat. It's a Disney movie. Directed by the guy who
Learning
did Mary
things.
Poppins, actually.
Don't have time for rabbit holes.
But so that is a big thing. There are definitely a lot of things that I think are weird and maybe not useful technique-wise, but there's also a lot of stuff that is really cool. And then there are a couple things that are just bad for the game as a whole. So it's a bit of a mixed bag right here. But overall, I think pretty good. Go stealth car.
All right, with 5 seconds left to spare, we will see you next time to talk about the other mechanics in this book.
Stealth